and intersessional meetings of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly and the report of the 52nd session of the African Caribbean Pacific Parliamentary Assembly and the 36th session of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. As well, there will be two statements which will be, one will be issued and the other one will be sought. The nominated Senator, Victor Prangay, will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Roads and Transportation on traffic congestion at the Gilgil Way Bridge along the Nairobi-Nakuru Highway. The Senate Majority Leader will issue a statement on the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, 10th September 2019. The Senator for Vihiga County, Senator George Khaniri's motion on the creation of support services for members of the disciplined forces and their families will be debated. The balance of time remaining is 2 hours 29 minutes. The Senator will be calling upon the Senate to also call upon the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government in partnership with the Ministry of Defense to establish counseling and support centers in all premises housing disciplined forces and provide mandatory counseling to all service personnel and the families of those currently serving and those who may have been killed in line of duty. The Senator, Dr. Gertrude Musuruve's motion, which is also active in the Senate, is also in the order of business this afternoon. The motion is on retirement age for persons with disabilities in public service and in academia. The Senator is concerned that Article 27, subsection E of the UNCRPD advocates for party states, of which Kenya is one, to promote employment opportunities and career advancement of persons with disabilities in the labor market, as well as assistance in finding, obtaining, maintaining, and returning to employment. Now, therefore, the Senate calls upon the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection and county governments to develop a policy to ensure that PWDs or persons with disabilities in gainful employment in public service retire at the age of 65 years instead of 60 years, and persons with disabilities in academia, such as universities and colleges, retire at the age of 75 years instead of 70 years. The balance of time remaining on this particular motion by the Honorable Senator Gertrude Musuruve is 2 hours and 55 minutes. Senator Charles Kibiru will move a motion on planting of trees along major infrastructure projects in Kenya. The Senator is concerned that the implementation of various provisions have failed to comprehensively address the continued large-scale environmental degradation that takes place during construction of infrastructure projects, and that the mitigation measures undertaken thereon have failed to compensate for the damage done to the environment, as well as the negative effects of human and wildlife population along the infrastructure project paths. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the national government, together with the county government...
Fatuma Dudo. Speaker, I wish to join you in welcoming the teachers from Mugoma. Of course, I know their senator was around this morning, maybe got a bit delayed. But what I wanted to say is that you are most welcome here, and I hope your stay here will be useful. You can be able to carry something from here that can help you at school. Feel most welcomed.
Thank you very much, Senator Dulo. Next order. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Next order. Order number 5, papers. I can't see any of the senators who are scheduled to lay papers. We can come back to it later. Let's proceed. Senator Linturi, you approach the chair.
Order number 6,
Approach the chair.
notices of motion.
I think we can go on.
Order number 7, statements.
We can start with the Senate Majority Leader's statement as we reorganize the business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to raise pass one to Standing Order 52-1, where I hereby present to the Senate the business of the House for the week commencing Tuesday, 10th September 2019. Pass one to the resolution of the Senate adopted on 14th February 2019. On the Senate calendar, the House will proceed on a 32 days recess beginning today at the rise of the House. In this regard, the Senate Business Committee has not scheduled any business for the week. Upon resumption of the sitting on Tuesday, 10th September 2019, the House Business Committee will meet on that day to schedule the business of the Senate. Honorable Senators, subject to the further direction by the House Business Committee, the Senate will consider bills scheduled for second reading and those at the Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, 10th September 2019. The Senate will also continue with the consideration of the business that will not be concluded in today's order paper. On Wednesday, 11th September and Thursday, 19th September 2019, the Senate will consider business that will not be concluded on Tuesday and any other business scheduled by House Business Committee. Honorable Senators, since we came from the April recess, we have passed 6 bills which have been assented to by His Excellency the President, and 23 bills which have been sent to the National Assembly for concurrence. I wish to commend you for the commitment you have shown so far. However, there are a number of bills before the House at second reading and Committee of the Whole stages. I do hope that we will dispense with them as soon as we resume in September. To emphasize the statement I made last week, there are also a number of statements and petitions pending before standing committees. I urge the respective standing committees to ensure that the process of consideration of the said business is expedited during this recess period and table reports on them upon resumption of sittings in September. Honorable Senators, cognizant of the need to enhance the interaction between the Senate and county government as a means of bringing the Senate closer to the counties and the general public, and pursuant to Article 126(1) of Constitution and Standing Order 31(1) of the Senate resolved on Thursday, 13th June 2019, that its plenary and committee sittings be held in Kitui County from 16 to 20th September 2019. I therefore urge all senators to plan to attend this important sitting in our calendar of events. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to take this opportunity to wish senators a good recess as you take this time to reconnect with your families, friends, and constituents. I thank you and hereby lay the statement on the table of the House. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. What is it, Senator Musuruve?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have something to say concerning the business of the House in Kitui that will start in September. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, at one point, the Senate went to Uasin Gishu, still on the same business. And I want to say that during that time, The Education Committee of the Senate actually launched books in special needs that are supposed to be used as instructional materials in schools. And the books that were launched, Mr. Speaker, were KICD approved, and there were teachers' copies, learners' copies, charts, and instructional materials that are really handy in this country, not only for special education, but for the purpose of inclusivity, even for people who are hearing and people without disabilities. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say that these books are still available and in volumes, and I want to go on record, Mr. Speaker, as a senator representing persons with disabilities, saying that I would really want to make a donation to the counties of Kitui, counties of Machakos, and the county of Makueni when we go for the state, for business, Senate business, for the purpose of inclusivity, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that there's a dire need of the people getting to really learn sign language. There's a dire need for people including even persons with disabilities. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say even on the floor of this House, that the President launched the special needs sector policy. And in the policy, it comes out clearly, Mr. Speaker, that there's a void, there's a gap in special needs education, and materials are lacking, Mr. Speaker. So I want to briefly say,
Senator Musuruve, your point is that now that the majority leader has told the House that the Senate will sit in Kitui County in September, you are pleading that during that visit, an opportunity be granted to you to provide donations for books in the Ukambani counties regarding persons with disabilities. Is that your request?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my request. And another request is that I be facilitated to ensure that the books reach there because they are voluminous. Thank you very much.
Very well. I will ask you, I will direct you to make a formal request to the Speaker so that that matter can be processed through the SBC to see how it can be accommodated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So you better make that request early, because the possibility of, as you know, our calendar says that we proceed on recess today. So make that request before the start of the August recess.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. The next statement, what is it, Senator Wambua?
Speaker, I thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, to also just join my colleague, Senator Dulo, in wishing my colleagues well during the recess. Speaker, I just wanted to confirm to this House that the arrangements are being made to offer that opportunity for Senator Musuruve to make donations to those schools. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good. Helps him to have come earlier. So, Senator Musuruve, please consult with Senator Wambua. And in case you need any further help from the SBC, write to the Speaker making that request in terms of what, particularly what kind of help, assistance you may need. Very well. And Senator Prangay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 48-1, I rise to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Roads and Transportation concerning traffic congestion at the Gilgil Weighbridge along the Nairobi-Nakuru Highway, Nakuru County. In the statement, the committee should explain the circumstances that have led to increased traffic congestion at the Gilgil Weighbridge along the Nairobi-Nakuru Highway, including the latest one that lasted over 24 hours. Number two, state measures being undertaken by the government to prevent occurrence of such traffic congestion along the stretch of the Nairobi-Nakuru Highway. Number three, state when the government plans to dual the Nairobi-Nakuru Highway as a long-term measure to prevent traffic congestions on the said road. And number four is to state whether the government has made plans for the bridge located in Gilgil off the Nairobi-Nakuru Highway. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairperson, Transport Committee, Vice Chair, Senator Wetangula.
Mr. Speaker, I don't see the chair here of transport, but the majority leader is here. I hope she will be able to deal with this matter. That point, Mr. Speaker, raised by the distinguished senator is very important for those of us who come from the western counties. It used to take us under an hour to drive from Nairobi to Nakuru. Now it takes us 3 hours. What is the rationale the chair should tell this House and the country of having that way bridge? Because most of the trucks going to western neighbors come from Mombasa, Mr. Speaker. There's a way bridge at Mariakani that weighs trucks that are carrying containers with seals. So there is no proximity or possibility of any container being opened and additional cargo being put on. They come to Mlolongo, that weighed again. On the way to Western, they weigh them in Gilgil, and when they get to Webuye, they're weighed again. And in the process, Mr. Speaker, there are terrible snarl-ups. I raised a question here 3 weeks ago, and I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, I must give credit where it's due. Senator Wamatangi, as the chair of the committee, has assured me that next Thursday is coming to Malaba Border Point, where trucks are queuing for up to 28 kilometers from the border point all the way close to Bungoma town. This undermines international trade, denies the country quick revenue, and does so many other inconveniences to everybody. Because the moment trucks have sealed the road for 28 kilometers, Mr. Speaker, it means only oncoming vehicles can pass. It means all vehicles going the same direction have just got to queue. So this is a very, very important point. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, the committee chair must tell this House, the road from Mombasa to Malaba is the artery of the economy of this country, carrying 60% of our external trade to Uganda, to Rwanda, to Burundi, to South Sudan, to Congo, and sometimes up to northern Zambia, where goods go up to Bujumbura. They're put on freights, on ships on Lake Tanganyika to northern Zambia. When is this road going to be dualized from Mombasa all the way to Malaba to open up the growth of the economy?
Very well, Senator Wambua.
Thank you, Chair. To congratulate us, Senator Pragay, for bringing this statement. Chair, to confirm to this House that I am a member in good standing of the Roads Committee. And we, as Senator Moses Wetangula said, the committee will be visiting Malaba on Thursday. And now, because it's the same direction, I believe that when we sit as a committee, we will see how we can arrange to deal with the two issues within next week and report back to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's a very good proposal, Senator Wambua. And it's also assumed that you will go by road, because you cannot talk about opening up roads and you are oversighting from the skies and heavens. It will be very good so that you look at that road from start to end. And in the process, thank you for your innovative way of looking at it. The committee can, anything between Nairobi and Malaba can be accommodated. Yes. And maybe on return, you can return differently. Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you. I want to congratulate Senator Prigay, because when he told me about this statement, I said I must contribute a little bit in terms of trying to bring sanity into this issue. Mr. Speaker, sir, this issue reminds me of a border town, or rather a border called Kazungula in Zambia, between the border of Botswana and Zambia, where trucks can even last for 2 weeks. Yet the trucks have all the clearing documents, vehicles with a carnet or vehicles with any other documentation for export can stay there for 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, sir, for one reason: corruption. Whatever is happening in Gilgil, let us not try to justify it with any other words. If you count the number of way bridges, Mr. Speaker, sir, from even the border of Namanga all the way to Busia, there's nothing which will change. All those trucks, when they pass there, some of them which are on transit, the weight is still the same. So I think it is about time that we accept that unless we can be able to deal with this issue of corruption and come up with better ways, you know, of weighing these trucks. Why set up a weigh bridge in Naivasha, yet they still have to be measured when they get to Busia? I think we have to come up with a better way of ensuring that there is constant flow of traffic. You know, Mr. Speaker, sir, this country, sometimes I think all the transport department have sort of like missed their priorities in terms of growing an economy. I keep on saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this country is where dumping laws are not fully effected or implemented. This issue of, you know, congesting our roads, we're already congesting our roads by making sure that we are overtaxing those people who are buying new cars and introducing taxes for all, you know, all vehicles and reducing them, then congesting our trucks, congesting our roads. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think it's about time that when the Committee on Transport will be looking at this issue, they also have to come up, and I would like to add, if it is possible, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I hope that the chairperson will look at the Hansard and not only rely on the statement by Senator Prigay, is really to fully, when they are explaining the circumstances that have led to the increase in traffic, is to come up with a better explanation on what measures is the traffic department taking to ensure that they come up with a unified system that when a truck is measured in Namanga, the only other place it should be measured in is Busia, assuming it's a transit truck. But if it is taking the goods from one destination to another, maybe then they should come up, NTSA or someone else should come up with another system that identify each truck on which one is the final destination. So that if a truck goes through Naivasha, if the final destination is Busia, then there's no reason as to why we should weigh that truck there, because it is on transit. But if the final destination is in Nakuru, then at least we create a path, or maybe a way that that truck which is going to Nakuru can be weighed. Otherwise, if we are not creative, this issue of trucks piling there will continue, and people will continue getting money through sideways so that their trucks have been cleared. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. I direct the Committee on Transports and Roads and Transportation, while addressing the matter concerning the Malaba border post, during the intended visit on Thursday, to also include within the itinerary a visit to the weighbridge at Gilgil and address the issues raised by the request for statement from Senator Prangay. And because this is a recurring issue and is a matter of international trade, movement of goods and services, regional integration, it's a matter of great concern, We even had a related issue, I think, in the House yesterday about the port in Mombasa. So I direct that, other than the visit, I will exercise the discretion under Standing Order 48 and direct the committee, once they dispose of the matter, to table a report on the first day after the recess. So ordered. Thank you. Thank you. We have a few more. I think we're done with the Senator Mahmood, no, Senator Linturi.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 47, 1, to make a statement on the county government's infrastructure projects comprising county executive and quarter offices, assembly chambers, offices, and county state officers' residences. Mr. Speaker, the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget tabled a report to the Senate on 29th November 2019 on the county government's infrastructure projects comprising of the county executive and quarter offices, chambers, offices, and the state officer residences. As we may recall from the committee's report, the committee attention was drawn by the Commission on Revenue Allocation to the issue of ongoing county projects, which included those offices and residences projects as by the county governments. The residence projects included those houses of the speakers and deputy governors, and the end quarters of the county assemblies. Consequently, the committee invited stakeholders and held meetings with various stakeholders, including the Salaries Remuneration Commission, SRC, Control on Budget, Commission on Revenue Allocation, CRI, the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, and Public Works. The committee arrived at several resolutions, among them the provision of ceilings for use by county governments, and the ceilings are as follows. The residence for county governance was pegged at 45 million, deputy governors 35, county assembly speakers 35, and the size of the land should not exceed 2 acres, 2 acres, and the construction of the executive offices should not exceed 500 million. The cost of construction of county assembly chambers, Mr. Speaker, for a house that has up to a maximum of 30 members of parliament should not go beyond 200, 1 to 60, 250, 61 to 90, 400 million. Further, the committee recommended that the counties which underwent contracts which were above the recommendations should consider negotiating with a view of adjusting the contract sum. Mr. Speaker, the Senate on 14th May 2019 adopted the committee report without amendments. Following the Senate resolution, the Commission on Revenue Allocation issued a circular to all governors and speakers of the county assemblies, drawing them to the attention of the resolution, among other information, including a letter from the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development, reference number CNG/GEN Volume 1/3, dated 19th June 2019, on county infrastructure projects. The circular also made reference to a response to the letter from the Ministry of Commission on the Commission on Revenue Allocation, reaffirming the need for counties to adhere to the Senate resolution, but also advising that the exemptions from the ceilings can only be provided by the Senate on a case-by-case basis, which recommendations from the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Speaker, a few counties, namely Nyandarua, Nyamira, Isiolo, Tana River, Samburu, Mandera, Kilifi, and Meru, and is already started infrastructure and development projects by the time the Senate resolved to provide ceilings for the county infrastructure projects. Further, the status of construction in some of the counties were at various stages, and some were 40% completion, and the contractual obligations entered into by the Senate county governments with the contractors were beyond the amounts provided for in the ceilings. In view of the above facts and the said ceilings and certain county governments are now staring at the possible unnecessary lawsuits by the contractors, delays in completing the infrastructure developments projects, and uncertainty as how they should proceed in instances where it is not possible to go by the Senate resolutions. Mr. Speaker, sir, I therefore request this Honorable Senate, through the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget, to relook at the matter with a view to meeting with all the relevant stakeholders again and considering the cases of the affected counties with a view to giving further recommendations and direction on each of the affected counties so as to avoid the stalling of the project and averting the expensive lawsuits that may ensue. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Linturi. I think that's a statement that touches on a number of counties. It's under 47.1, isn't it? Yeah, it touches on a number of counties. So I'll allow a few comments before I give further directions, or before I give directions. So I'll start with the Senator for Nairobi County.
Mr. Speaker, Senator Linturi is sitting next to me, but I have a totally contrary opinion from that statement. Mr. Speaker, we're living at a time in our country where a majority of Kenyans are struggling, even just to eke out a living. Mr. Speaker, yes, it is true, and I just want to say that for where those projects have started, let them be finished. But true leadership in this time and day in our country. The other day, a lady in Kenyatta Hospital and the family, I think they lost a member because of 1,950 shillings. We're talking about schools. I saw a school in Kinango where children do not even have desks. Yet we want to say, let's give a ceiling of 150 million for a deputy governor to have a house, 200 million shillings for a governor to have a house, a speaker. Tomorrow it will be senators. Mr. Speaker, the ceiling for those who have not started these projects should be zero. We need to actually start feeling what Kenyans are feeling. We cannot be saying that a county has gone up to 40%, 50% completion of a governor's house, a deputy governor's house, yet they have not built a single infrastructure project for the people that we serve. We must change and we must refresh our thinking. Mr. Speaker, when this comes, I know it has been happening even in the last Senate and now, but we cannot keep doing the wrong thing and expect different results. I would pass an amendment to the Finance Committee on this, that the project we started, so that we don't incur losses through litigation, etc., be completed at the lowest cost possible, and we put a freeze on construction of residences for individuals until, Mr. Speaker, our economy is at a state where we can actually afford and say proudly to our people that we've built a house for your governor for 200 million, a house for your deputy for 150, for your senator, etc. For now, we cannot afford it as a country.
Order, Senator Sakaja. There are no senators' residencies anywhere. Very well. Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to give my few sentiments on this issue of counties spending money without ceiling. Although Parliament can legitimately interfere, we have to put in a balance between existing projects and think about how we can grandfather into the new ceiling. My biggest problem, Mr. Speaker, sir, is on the cost of litigation in these counties. Every time, every so often, you find counties that come up with huge bills in terms of litigation. And it is because sometimes we interfere without looking at existing contracts. I think even though as Parliament we have the power to be able to control these things, the first thing we have to do is to ask ourselves, do we have legislation that can be able to ensure that these ceilings are there before any projects begin? So, Mr. Speaker, sir, in my view, I would support certain of Senator Linturi's statement in carrying out an audit to find out how many projects have really been built and public money have been utilized effectively. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, this contract is a conduit of a cabal getting into the public coffer and really hurting the public, and those projects never been completed. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we presented our report on Kilifi County, we found that the governor there had spent about 300 million to build his residence. I mean, seriously, we cannot be spending money, public money, just haphazardly. We have to figure out what is it that we can be able to do. So the first step, as I support certain aspect of Senator Linturi's statement, is to carry out an audit out of the 47 counties to see these public infrastructures, how much money has been spent in building those. We can even go further, and I would like to encourage the chairperson of the Budget and Finance Committee to go further and carry out and figure out, follow the money trail or the paper trail. See how, if there are any kickbacks going back to the governors, involve KRA to see on those contracts so that we can accurately stand here and defend any contractors. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, this burden we have of pending bills is because some contractors, team up with governors, and they find a way of ensuring that eventually the governors get money in cash. So for us to be able to feel the pain that the Kenyans are feeling, I would actually encourage the Finance Committee now to do so and follow thoroughly and audit those projects and also audit the contractors.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Olekina. Senator Dulo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me thank Senator Linturi for this statement. I know Isiolo is one of the counties that are mentioned, especially on the office headquarters. First, let me say that here, for record purpose, that Isiolo County does not have headquarters. And number two, the delay might have not been on the national government. It was the delay by the county government. Because I remember very well, in the last Senate, I sat in a committee where it was chaired by Engineer Karue, and I was the vice chair, and we agreed that 5 counties were supposed to be allocated an office, budget for an office allocation so that they can be able to be at the same level. And I remember, Mr. Speaker, your county also benefited from that. Unfortunately, for Isiolo County, that has not happened. Now, I agree that the issue of ceiling must be there so that taxpayers' money is not actually used anyhow. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow the counties that have already started to get stuck, because at the end of the day, we are going to lose a lot of money in litigation and all that. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, counties, some of them actually engage contractors in a long-term project. For example, a very good example one is Isiolo County, where they have engaged a contractor to construct a chamber for 3 years. That means it will take up to the end of the term of the current assembly, which means there is no public participation, Mr. Speaker. There is no, in fact, proper budget allocation and ceiling for those kind of projects. We should not allow, as a Senate, people just to get out of their way to come up with contracts and misuse taxpayers' money. And that is not priority, especially for my county that gets only 4 billion.
So
I thank you,
is
Mr.
your
Speaker.
recommendation? Thank you.
My
Thank
position is ceiling must be there.
Okay.
But the contracts that have already started should be allowed to be completed. I thank you.
Well put. Senator Wetangula.
Mr. Speaker, some of these issues have actually been canvassed before the Committee of Finance, and I can see my chairman here. We were confronted with a situation where you find, Mr. Speaker, one county is building or buying a property, and when you go to the next one, the value is triple. Like the classic case of Kilifi, where a certain Mzungu built 2 identical houses on the same acreage, on the creek. He sold one house to an individual at 45 million and sold the other house to the Kilifi county government at 300 million. And nobody did anything. And Mr. Speaker, it's obvious this was a fraud. It was not a purchase. We went to Wajir, Mr. Speaker, And the former governor of Wajir built a fantastic county headquarters, full with a prayer mosque, 4 stories, with boardrooms and everything at 240 million. And you go to other counties, it's the complete opposite. So the Committee of Finance, Mr. Speaker, and I hope I speak for my chairman, we have actually engaged with the Ministry of Public Works, or the Department of Works, and set some ceilings that if you are building a residence, it can't be more than this. If you are building a chamber, it can't be more than this. But I also want, Mr. Speaker, to tell the House that there are certain, because of budgetary constraints, and you know the national government is holding more money and giving counties very little. So certain projects transcend financial years. So you can have a project that can run in the first, second, and third financial year for completion. In those peculiar cases, we should understand. But this House also passed, Mr. Speaker, like Nyahururu, for example, Nyandarua. Nyandarua, when it started as a county, the governor was sitting in offices in Laikipia, which was not tenable. Your own county had no headquarters. What this House must do, Mr. Speaker, in my view, and as we move to the next level, when we come back, the Sang bill that provided that we as senators chair boards of development in our counties so that we can be able to see how money is spent. I was very impressed, Mr. Speaker, when we went to Bari, Senator Joyce Laboso, when our distinguished colleague from Bomet told us that Joyce Laboso, the late, and may her soul rest in eternal peace, had invited Senator Langat, and he chaired all meetings where development programs were decided. So he knew what was going on. This idea of governors seeing senators as enemies, as frightful characters, as witch hunters, must stop. Must stop so that, Mr. Speaker, we give the public value for money. So I support what the senator is saying. But lastly, Mr. Speaker, the enforcement of the Public Finance Management Act. It has very clear provisions. You cannot, and in fact it's a criminal offense, for anybody in authority to procure for goods or services without an attendant budget. So this idea of pending bills should not even arise if the law was enforced, Mr. Speaker. And everybody must be held to account.
Thank you. I will hear first from the chairman, then Senator Linturi will rebut in a minute or two.
Let me thank the Senator Weru for bringing this statement. The Speaker, sir, this matter of infrastructure projects in counties actually is a matter we have been dealing with as a Committee of Finance. And, you know, there's no control in counties as far as, you know, what their priorities are. In the first 2 years of in existence for the counties, everybody went on, you know, spending spree or building infrastructure projects. It was very clear from the advice of in that time, CRA, that the first 5 years they should not be undertaking large infrastructure projects actually. And SRC came up with a plan for them to rent, at least for offices that time. Fair enough, I think offices were necessary, headquarters were necessary, assemblies were necessary, but you see the differentials in counties was surprising. In fact, our attention was drawn to a lot of, you know, paper reports, you know, a lot of hue and cry in the counties when we saw the budget for 2018-19, I think 2018-19 or 2017-18. 17-18. You know, a lot of variance. Some providing 200 million, some 300 million. And when you look at it, we engage the Ministry of Transport and Public Works because they are supposed to be the advisory, actually the advisors on public infrastructure. And most counties don't want to use them for obvious reason. Mr. Speaker, sir, counties have gone ahead. In fact, a county like Cielo, I think awarded a tender for 870 million. 870 million or something. They were among the 5 counties that are supposed to get, you know, affirmative action according to what the Senate gave them in the last Senate. Tana River, Cielo, Trakanithi, Nyandarua, Lamu, 5 of them. Only 2 actually awarded by, you know, as of now, the time we knew, is only Trakanithi and Nyandarua that awarded. Tana River has not started anything. It's not true they have started constructing. Isiolo was doing it last year. And we sat down with the Ministry of Public Works, and we went through the possibilities of what the costs are of those projects. And this is how the ceilings came. We got prototype designs. The designs were looked at, and in fact, we said that the acreage, even for the offices, must be controlled. The typical office, residence of the PCs in the 8 headquarters of the provinces actually was our guide. those are very good buildings on 2 acres, and they are very nice ones. People want to build now mansions which are actually far beyond the capacity of the counties. Headquarters, of course, we said that 500 million is not small money. So we said contracts have started, yes, but there's provision in contract law also to downsize projects with agreements with the contractors. In fact, up to 25% can go down. So we said, whereas they have already started contracting, let's allow maybe negotiation between the contractor and the county government for them to downsize and come to 25% below. Nobody's interested. On the contrary, contracts are terminated and new ones are awarded at even 3 times the price of the original contract sum. So I think there must be some way of reining on this rogue behavior, sorry to use the word. It is serious, so whereas there is no law which allows us to control how much the ceiling should be, we thought we were giving advisory opinion to our counties so that they go by these figures. We expect the Auditor General and people who are dealing with financial, looking at those things to come with those figures and use that as a guide. Now, the request they're asking us now is to reconsider. The settlement is here, we'll convene our meeting again, but I think we have exhausted all the possibilities, and nobody seems to be listening. Now, the CRA has written a letter to them, I'm happy. At least CRA has written a letter to them, a way of implementing our resolution. We will, of course, again engage CRA and the other, COB and what do you call it, the Minister of Works, and see what is the compliance like, what are the difficulties, what needs to be done. But I assure Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a lot of, greed for big projects. This country, we are very busy building bricks and stones. Nobody wants to do the actual service delivery projects.
Chair, you have not told the House what you intend to do about...
We will, I've said. I think Senator Watangula engaged you.
Yes.
We will engage again the CRA, COB.
Now, how much time do you need for that?
And the stakeholders, we will get to them now that we are going on recess.
Very good.
I think by the time you come back, the first 2 weeks of our return, we'll be able to bring a report to this House.
Okay. Senator Inturi, is that prejudicial to the reasons why you brought this statement request? Actually, it's not, it's under 47, isn't it?
Yes.
It's just a general statement, a statement of general concern, or on a general issue.
Specific issue, Chair.
Yes.
Yes, if you allow me.
Yes, how would you want this House to be helpful?
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank everyone that has made some contribution to this, but want to address the specific matter on this one so that it's not generalized. Why I raised that matter is because that's really on the 7 counties, but the only aspect that the chair may not have really understood why this matter required it looked by them again is because, Mr. Speaker, I raised the aspect or an issue whereby contracts were entered into between county governments and the contractors before the Senate
I got that very clearly, actually.
And where projects have been done beyond the amounts of money that are set by the ceilings.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Senator Inturi, actually, Chairperson, the committee should distinguish between very specific issues about ongoing contracts which have been entered to between counties and contractors, whose application of these ceilings could lead to legal implications and lawsuits, versus the general issue about the ceilings and the ongoing issues and discussions about whether these ceilings are being respected. So I would want Senator Lenturi, you see under 47, the Speaker may, in appropriate cases, refer specific issues to a committee. If you would want a specific attention on those specific issues, I would like to know before I make my direction.
The specific issue that I want to defend.
Would you want the committee to treat
Meru
that issue
specifically.
about Meru and a few other counties which
I
had
may
had?
not be able to speak about many others because
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
But generally, when I went through the correspondences from CRI Public Works,
Yes, yes.
and that's mentioned those counties, and I didn't want to be to just try to bring up an issue about Meru alone when other counties were being
Very
affected.
good.
But for purposes of specificity, I would want the matter on Meru referred to the committee and
Okay.
being dealt with on its own merit, because we'll be able to prove that case to them.
I'll amend
While
that
it were
request and direct as follows. Chairperson, look at the counties whose cases fall under the Meru template and use the request by Senator Linturi to give this House recommendations by looking at other counties, Meru included, and table a report on the first day after recess. So ordered. Thank you. What is it, Senator Mohamud?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise on a point of order under clause 51, 1A, to make a statement relating to the issue of the crisis in the counties occasioned by the lack of enactment of a Division of Revenue Act. Mr. Speaker, sir, this House, this Senate is aware that we have been dealing with the issue of the Division of Revenue Bill for the last several weeks. And up to yesterday.
Chairperson, you are under 51?
51, 1A.
1A, okay,
Yes.
proceed.
Matters may make a statement relating to a matter for which the committee is responsible.
Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, sir, as late as yesterday, we did pass, passed the National Assembly Division Revenue Bill with amendments. And as of now, today is the 8th of August 2019, 1 month plus into the financial year 2019-20. There is nothing available to the counties in terms of paying, for their services, including salaries. The Speaker, sir, whereas the national government is enjoying the benefits of the so-called enacted Appropriation Act, which you have doubted, which is a matter in court now, the legality of which is being contested, they are enjoying, under voter on account, they are drawing money so that they can pay for their services. The Speaker, the same is not happening in the counties. And counties are now in crisis. They can't pay their salaries. And this, I think, is deliberate because there's been occasion by the procrastination of the National Assembly and the people who believe that they have the mandate to deal with budget and nobody else. The Speaker, sir, this House must rise to the occasion and pronounce itself on this matter so that counties are not starved. Ideally, no arm of government, not any level of government should be enjoying any funding from the consolidated funds because DORA has already been enacted. Because without DORA, I think no other law, neither Appropriation Act, nor CARA, not even the Appropriation Acts within the assemblies can be enacted without DORA. But the other side has gone and enacted the CARA, and they are drawing from the benefit of CARA, the enacted, Appropriation Act, and they are drawing on that. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we must address ourselves this matter, and a way must be found. Whereas the law has not actually foreseen a situation like this one, and is only under, in the event maybe a delay is occasioned to Appropriation Act of the counties, then counties can draw money from their CRF fund, under Section 134 of the PFM Act. But we are not there now, and I think there's a big problem. So I want this House to pronounce itself on this matter and urge the National Treasury to administratively provide for the counties to be able to continue providing services to the people of Kenya in the interim period, the time when we are going to take time, maybe, hopefully, we are going to go to mediation again with the National Assembly, and before the enactment of DORA, and thereafter CARA and the Appropriation Act, the counties to be allowed to be actually supported, be given some funding through administrative process, some administrative process to be actually worked out. And this happened actually not the first time. It happened, there's a precedent already set in 2013-14 financial year. I don't know, I think there was, I don't remember the actual year, in the last Senate, 14-15, when there was delay in DORA, some administrative mechanism was put in place and counties were allowed to continue. We are now facing a crisis, and this crisis must be dealt with. And we want this House, I want this House to resolve, not to argue, to resolve that the National Treasury be called upon to provide the required funding the way, you know, normally similar to what is provided in the national government in terms of a vote on account, for them to draw at least up to half of whatever figure that will come, because you don't know what the figure is now, but some approximate figure so that they can be able to run the services. Our hospitals must work, people must get their salaries, the counties must be able to buy medicine, you know, ECDs must run. I think the way we are now, there's a crisis, and we should not be just sitting comfortably in the comfort of the Assembly and the Senate and whichever house we sit in, National Treasury and everywhere else, when we are knowing that our people are suffering. And rest assured, senators, all activities that are happening in this country actually are happening in the counties. And without counties, maybe a county like Nairobi can be able to service itself with the revenue collection, but that is not actually supposed to be that way. The National Treasury must give the counties what their rights are under some administrative process, because it is not the first time, and it's possible, and I don't think it will be breaking any law. So I will urge that the Senate resolves, and my committee will be prepared maybe to meet and even engage the CS, National Treasury, so that, you know, we can be able to move. So I want to be given that. I think this is a matter I want to raise on the floor of the House. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to submit.
Thank you, Senator Mahmood. Honorable Senators, as you're aware, the House yesterday did pass the amendments did pass the Division of Revenue Bill with amendments, and as resolved by the House, I want to confirm that I did send a message to the National Assembly yesterday. However, given that we are expected to proceed on recess later today as per our calendar, I want to agree with the chairperson of the Finance and Budget Committee that in spite of our very good work yesterday under very difficult circumstances, the crisis still lingers. Therefore, as we go away, we must be conscious that, one, we have no control over, in terms of timelines or even the substance of the action that will be taken by the other house. And therefore, in line with the comments made by the chairman under Standing Order 51 1A, we must look beyond what we did yesterday and ask ourselves whether there is something that needs to be done during recess, possibly by the committee or the Senate leadership, to see whether there is an intervention that can unlock this stalemate. We've looked at the law, we've looked at Article 222, 223, and it appears the law doesn't have a solution to what we are having now. So I would, given the gravity of this matter, I would encourage a few more observations. Although we are almost extinguishing our statement hour, I'll apply Standing Order number 1 and extend the statement hour so that we can get a few observations and perhaps make a resolution of some kind or some recommendation which the chair is able to give in form of directions. You'll also see the limit in Standing Order 51, which Senator Mohamud has used, is 20 minutes, but I'm willing to expand that timeline. And finally, you will discover under Standing Order number 51, the Speaker is not given the discretion to commit the matter to a committee. But I will say, given that this is a situation that is not anticipated, not in the law, not in the standing orders, it's a matter for which Standing Order 1 applies, and therefore, I'll be more than happy, after listening to you, to try and give directions, maybe to the committee, to see what they can do on behalf of the House as we proceed on recess. And therefore, I would like to hear from a Senator for Migori, Senator Ayako.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, implementation of functions must necessarily and deliberately be funded. If there is no funding, then technically and constructively, functions grind to a halt and an organization grinds to a halt. This is unfortunately the situation that is obtaining in counties. My suggestion is the national government that continues to draw from a questionable Appropriations Act must be knowingly drawing that money, conscious of the fact that it is not anchored on legislation. It is probably administrative. If our committee, and I'm glad the chair of Budget and Finance Committee has identified this priority, if they can take the initiative, get in touch with the office of the Controller of Budget and find out the basis upon which the national government is being funded, the same basis, the same innovation. Because, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure in your law class, same as my law classes, we were told that any law that creates such a situation may only have been drafted by a fool. So, Mr. Speaker, every law must have an exit strategy, must have a safe passage. I am sure if we look at the totality of the Constitution, we should be able, and our committee should be able, to find a safe passage to negotiate a situation where our county governments will be funded. Article 222, 223, and 224 seem to talk of appropriations of funds that are allocated to the national government and the other county appropriation bill or act. But we must find a common sense situation that is not going to have the county governments crash. That would not be the purpose of the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a timely thing and this is an urgent matter.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, would like as practical suggestions as possible, and Senator for Migori has told us about the possibility of the committee engaging the Controller of Budget and look for innovations, which, if there are innovations that are working for national government, they should be also maybe applicable to county governments. Senator Sakaja.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I first want to thank the chairman of the Committee on Finance. Mr. Speaker, over the last few days, he's been working overtime to try and actually deal with this matter. That's a very, we're in an awkward place as a country. Mr. Speaker, I was just going through the Constitution. If you look at Chapter 12, on the principles and framework of public finance, as well as the chapters on devolution, Mr. Speaker, the provisions of devolution were not to, and the subsequent laws that came, whether it is a PFM Act and other similar related acts of parliament and legislation, they were not to create a situation where you would have one level of government disadvantaged in such a situation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it has been very eloquently prosecuted in this House that the frame of mind that the division of revenue or the money that goes to counties is money that comes from the national government is debunked. That in true essence of Chapter 12, the division of revenue is what sets aside some money to go to the national level and some money to go to the counties. It is not the national government giving the counties money. And Mr. Speaker, with that frame in mind, and knowing very well that, of course, the matter is in court because of the Appropriation Act, which many of us feel really was not founded in law. If the national government, or rather if the county governments cannot be able to legislate and appropriate because the division of revenue has not been passed, then similarly it follows that the national government should not have been allowed to legislate on the appropriation because the same bill which gives each level of government its money has not been passed. Mr. Speaker, what can be done in the intervening situation? And I'm glad yesterday this Senate took up a very mature demeanor and disposition when we said that as a bigger house, as looking at this country as the fathers of devolution, that we will not go in the same spirit of an eye for an eye and we all lose our sight, or we will not try to get ahead and get even. But we will see what is the most pragmatic way to resolve this issue. One, when the legislation is still going on, and number two, when the matters are also before the courts. Mr. Speaker, this House needs to resolve as follows, Mr. Speaker, and this is my humble submission. This House can actually, through the Committee on Finance, because if you look at the spirit behind appropriation vote on account, it's usually 50% of the last amounts that had been appropriated. Mr. Speaker, we know already that 316 is what is being proposed from that House, 335 is what is being proposed from this House, Mr. Speaker. Whatever it may be, if we use the amount that was actually appropriated in the last financial year, because we are a zero-based budgeting regime, Mr. Speaker, and we must start from there, then if we take 25% of it, we can actually authorize the National Treasury to actually allow counties to withdraw the percentage based on the same allocation of revenue, which gave each county a formula to actually budget on that small amount based on the county. For instance, if out of the shareable revenue of 314 in the last financial year, Nairobi had 20% of it, for instance, or 15% of it. If you take now a percentage of the shareable revenue that we can agree, 25% or 50%, then Nairobi should be allowed to draw the same percentage it did in the last financial year just to take care of these costs. What does this do? This makes sure, Mr. Speaker, that even when the division of revenue is eventually passed, Nairobi will not have exceeded what it will eventually get. And that budgeting can be done. Mr. Speaker, I'm fortunate because as Senator for Nairobi, my county can actually be able to pay salaries because we collect a revenue of close to $1 billion every month, and that is a salary. But many other counties, and if I'm not wrong, all other counties have ground to a halt. They're doctors, they're nurses, they're county government workers who have to go home and explain where the rent is coming from, where school fees for the children are coming from. So I think if we take this view of the law, that yes, the law exists, but the law was not made, or rather the law was made for man, it's not man who was made for the law, and actually allow that version of vote on account based on a percentage of the last DORA, and then following a percentage of CARA as was applied last year, our counties will be able to survive within the next 2 weeks. And I think with this similar disposition that the House has taken and led by the Chairman of Finance and Budget, I am sure, especially if we send the same very soft and gentle senators to mediation. Senator Ledama was very soft, Senator Mutula, myself, we were very amiable, and we were not hardliners. We will eventually be able to unlock this as we wait for the courts to actually pronounce themselves. It's a very practical solution, and I'm sure, based on my research, it has been done in other jurisdictions, and I'll be glad to furnish the Chairman of Finance of such similar jurisdictions that have...
Could you repeat that solution again, proposed solution?
I said it is a version of vote on account where, based on what had gone to the lower level, if you look at South Africa, if you look at India, countries with similar framework of fiscal decentralization, that once that determination has not been made, the last amount that went to the counties, or in their cases the provinces, and then the percentage of that amount they got, they can actually be given a leeway to withdraw that money. And the control of budget can actually be allowed to support that expenditure, Mr. Speaker, in the intervening period, and a time limit is put of 2 to 3 months as this matter is sorted out. Otherwise, the courts, ourselves, and every other arm of government is not doing justice to our counties, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Well put, Senator Sakaja. Senator Wetangula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we find ourselves in a situation that requires very innovative thinking to resolve this. Mr. Speaker, Article 6 of the Constitution, Article 6.2, creates 2 levels of government, national and county, distinct and interdependent, and to conduct their mutual relations on the basis of consultation and cooperation. There's nowhere in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, where there is either an express provision or an implied provision of live and let die. It's live and let live. They must be interdependent, they must cooperate. Even with this situation that the country finds itself in, thanks to our colleagues in the lower house. Mr. Speaker, the national government is operating. And I suspect they're operating on the basis of vote on account, as has been ably stated by the Senator for Nairobi. What I suggest we do, and my chairman for finance is here, Mr. Speaker, there are 2 or 3 ways of resolving this. Number 1 is the route suggested on vote on account, that we know that whatever the situation, and that's why we are getting into this mess, because every society lives incrementally. It's only in Kenya where the National Assembly wants the counties to live by decreasing. Last year can only give way to a better this year. So assuming that we are running on the same spot, Mr. Speaker, then the control of budget should be innovative enough to allow the counties to draw at least not more than half of an equivalent of the allocation of last year to continue, particularly with their recurrent requirements. But knowing, Mr. Speaker, how this country is operating today, the witch hunts, and everybody's looking over their shoulder, everybody's looking for authority to do something that they ought to do even under the law, I would have suggested, Mr. Speaker, that you direct the Committee of Finance to bring a motion to this House, a motion that urges the control of budget to exercise her discretion and authority to allow drawings on vote on account, so that if she's looking for any legitimate and legal cover, the motion and the resolution of this House will give her that legitimate and legal cover, knowing very well that eventually DORA will be passed. Because, Mr. Speaker, the operations of the National Assembly, of the national government now, is not based on the appropriations bill, because the appropriations bill that was passed is a nullity. It can only have been legitimate if it came after DORA. If it came before DORA, it is no bill, it's no law at all. So they are taken to be operating on a vote on account. After DORA is passed, then we can move to a fresh appropriations bill. Mr. Speaker, yesterday this House took a very extraordinary nationalist position under your guidance to pass DORA, even when some members had very hard positions. It took many of us to convince each other to literally go and persuade our colleagues to come to the House. And of course, there were those who were picketing in the opposite direction. But we eventually passed DORA, Mr. Speaker. Having passed DORA yesterday, Mr. Speaker, one would expect that, honestly, there is no leg on which the National Assembly would stand on to reject our proposal. And when we go to mediation, because that is the next step, I would want also the chair, Mr. Speaker, to alert the House that even as we go on recess, we may be called upon to come back anytime for a special sitting to deal with this issue of financing the counties. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, because this is now a constitutional moment in the country, I think the BBI process is not closed. Today, yours truly and 3 other senators went there to present views on behalf of the Senate. I think we need, Mr. Speaker, as a House also, to quickly think, and the Finance Committee can guide the House, to see if there are any gaps and lacuna in the Constitution that we need to plug in, so that in the event we get to a similar situation in the future, we have a solution built in the Constitution itself. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well done. Well done. Thank you, Senator Wetangula. Senator Professor Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to add to the excellent presentation that has been done by the Senator of Nairobi and the Senator of Bungoma. I think they have really touched on almost everything that I would have loved to say. Only to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have found ourselves in a position that we would have wished not to be in, because we are one country. All of us come from counties, all of us come from constituencies, and we should really have been above this. But be it as it is, Mr. Speaker, the recommendation that has been put forward, which I would like to emphasize, is that one of voting on account. And I would like to suggest that the most comfortable would easily be 50% of last year's allocation, because the figure is there and we should not be worrying. And I really think that if we start the mediation next week, it will take only another 2 weeks and we should be okay. But if we vote on account and release 50% of last year's, whatever formula would be used by Treasury, and we urge our chair of the committee to really go and push it in Treasury, we should be able to move, because we cannot just shut down the counties, and yet we know that the money is there. So we need to find a way. But maybe this becomes also a lesson for the future. Mr. Speaker, it should be a lesson, because our assumption in this House was that without DORA, even the national government was going to shut down. But we have seen that they were able to wiggle away, their way out, and they are now spending from the same account. So I would like to support what my colleagues have said, that we really have a vote on account. I'm suggesting that our chair calls and insists on 50% of last year, because it's known, it's a figure that they don't have to even discuss. Although, again, last year was chopped by 9 billion. We are aware about that. But if we can get going, if we can get a 50% and start moving, I think that will take us far. Then, for the future, we will have to sit again as this Senate and ask ourselves how we can surmount the kind of challenges that can arise like this. With that, I would like to support the statement that has been given by the chair, and to say, let's move and seek for an avenue through the vote on account from Treasury, led by our chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Professor Kamar. Finally, Senator Ledama Olekina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm a bit confused, because I've listened to the proposals given by the good Senator of Nairobi, and also the good Senator, the distinguished Senator from Bungoma, in terms of this issue of the solutions that we can be able to come up with. When I look at the Constitution, Article 221, in terms of, 222, the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir, is very clear. It says, if the Appropriation Act for financial year has not been assented to, or is not likely to be assented to, by the beginning of that financial year, the National Assembly may authorize the withdrawal of money from a consolidated fund. I equally look at the PFM Act, Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 134, which talks about the same being a problem in terms of the county appropriation bill for a financial year has not been assented to. We are in a situation now, Mr. Speaker, sir, where the National Assembly has assented to into an appropriation bill which we have challenged because of the issue of DORA. I like the idea of borrowing from other jurisdictions. Like the United States, Mr. Speaker, sir, which is different from this country, there are 12 appropriation bills. There are those which are considered mandatory spending, or rather continuing resolutions, which allow legislators time for them to be able to sort out their mess and agreeing on how money should be spent out by the national government, or in this case, the federal government. I think what we need to ask ourselves is whether the suggestions we are coming up with here, Mr. Speaker, sir, will violate the Constitution, because there's an appropriation act, which we are saying it's illegal, which the law and also the Constitution is very clear that it is illegal. County governments have come up with budgets, which they cannot generally come up with those budgets without CARA. So we are in a situation where we are being confronted with illegalities. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't see a situation where Treasury can release money that they do not have. So, in my view, and this is a very interesting time, and I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, sir, that these things are happening now when we can be able, when we are talking about a referendum. Because when we have only one appropriation bill, which can only be altered by a supplementary appropriation act, then it puts us in limbo. What can we consider as mandatory spending so that the government does not come into a complete shutdown? What we are confronted now, Mr. Speaker, sir, is where we are relying on one appropriation act, or rather bill, that the two houses have not agreed upon, and the county government are suffering, yet the national government is proceeding. I'm not certain that we can actually come up with any solution as we speak right now, unless we say, then we are okaying and giving an okay to the Appropriation Act, which we all know it is illegal. It cannot come before the DORA. So I think the only solution here, Mr. Speaker, sir, is where we expedite this issue of mediation, we agree, and we follow the law. Because the moment we start saying we are borrowing from other jurisdictions which are not supported by our own constitution, then we'll be opening a Pandora's box that we may never be able to close. This is a very awkward moment and a very interesting time for this country, because we are learning. So that if the constitution comes tomorrow, the referendum, when we talk about amending the constitution, then we have to ask ourselves, is this one appropriation bill good for this country, or is it bad? Can we follow other jurisdictions like the United States, where they have 12 appropriation bills, where they have the continual resolution, which makes sure that people are paid their salary? Narok County, we are lucky. Maybe we get money from the Masai Mara, and we're able to continue paying salary. Nairobi is lucky, because what about the other counties? So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think, personally, it is good that this is happening now, that we can be able to reason, but the only solution, in my view, Mr. Speaker, sir, is if we follow the Constitution. I disagree that the Constitution was not, I disagree with the sentiments of my dear brother, that law was made for man, but not man, what did you say? Yeah, man's own law. No, it's just that I'm standing here, and I'm really confused about the solution that we have, because if we have the Constitution, which we must abide with, and this House is on record saying we are abiding by the Constitution, and that is why yesterday wisdom prevailed in this House, that we did not behave like hooligans in the lower house and saying we are throwing away our legislation, whereby the law is very clear.
What is it, Senator Sakaja?
Mr. Speaker, I just want to really ask whether it's in order for the senator to insinuate my suggestion is actually suggesting that we do away with the law and not abide by it. Yet what I was calling for was a more pragmatic approach to the laws that we already have, Mr. Speaker. Innovative ways of interpreting the laws that we actually have, Mr. Speaker, and not just innovative, based on precedent before we had devolution, and currently from other jurisdictions with a similar framework of fiscal decentralization as ours. That is how the law is read from the beginning to the end, 360 and all around, not word for word like the Bible, Mr. Speaker.
And in spirit.
And in spirit.
Very well. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I agree with my brother.
Yes.
That in times of difficulties, you have to come up with very innovative measures to be able to navigate those difficulties. But now, if we are bound by the rule of law, and it says, if you look at the PFM Act, Section 134, on the issue of CARA, you look at the Constitution, 222, there's no Appropriation Act. If we agree with the Appropriation Act, which money are they going to get that we've not been able to divide? So, even though we want to be creative, I think the creativity now will have to come based on the earlier suggestion by Senator Sakaja on the country now relooking on its budget-making process and moving into a zero-based budget. Because we can tell how much money did the county of Narok spend last year on certain projects. I know, Mr. Speaker, sir, currently Treasury has called all the national government ministries to be able to submit in line item budgets because they are trying to cut down on spending. So I think, in conclusion, if I clarify on my earlier points, I wasn't trying to demean whatsoever the suggestion made by the distinguished senator from Nairobi. I was just trying to be realistic in terms of the next steps. And finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, in my view, I think what we ought to do is that we have to pray so hard that wisdom prevail on the lower house and the national government so that we can mediate on these things and then push money to the people, not to the governors. We are sending money to the counties, not governors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, senators. Honorable senators, I want to take this opportunity to thank the chairman of the Committee of Budget and Finance, Senator Mohamud, for bringing this matter to the attention of the House by way of a statement which he has issued under the aegis of the Standing Order number 51-1A as a matter for which the committee is responsible. I further want to thank all the senators who have made their comments on this matter. Honorable senators, as I observed in my communication, which I issued yesterday, 7th of August, 2019, this is a matter like no other. This is a matter that is of utmost importance and which goes to the core of our existence as a house, and also which goes to the core of our nascent, devolved system of government. I say so, honorable senators, just to prepare us as a house to be full aware that this is a crisis, a special crisis, and through this crisis, the future of devolution and the future of our young system, whereby we are trying to disperse power and resources from one center to the rest of the country, is going to be tested. As you have observed, honorable senators, in the past few months, all the enemies of devolution from all quarters have ganged up. And therefore, we must be prepared for a long fight and a vicious fight. We must be prepared to, as you have suggested, be very innovative and think outside the box. And in fact, ignore the box altogether. So the distance and the preposition of whether we are inside or outside should not even arise. The box should not be featuring in our attempts to look for solutions. Honorable Senators, as the chairperson of the committee has correctly stated, the Senator has fully discharged, and I say this with a lot of pride, the Senate has fully discharged its constitutional and statutory mandate on this matter with regard to the division of revenue. Both the National Assembly and the Senate bills, and both bills now are now pending in the National Assembly. I want to thank you for being patriotic and remaining true to the cause for which this House has been called to advance. Honorable Senators, we are also aware that just like the Senate, the National Assembly is scheduled to proceed on a month-long recess. And going by our experience so far, I will not be surprised if it will not be in the interest of the National Assembly to prioritize and make urgent this matter for which we are discussing this afternoon. Therefore, we have to go back to Article 96 and say this is a case where our protective mandate of protecting counties and devolution must be demonstrated to the fullest. We are also scheduled to go on recess this afternoon. But Honorable Senators, I doubt whether there can be a recess worth talking about when we have the kind of crisis that is prevailing. And therefore, whereas I will not be encouraging that we interfere with the calendar of the House, I want to suggest that technically, although we proceed on recess, technically, we actually stand by for duty. And more so, our committee on finance, and I'm going to give direction just now in a while, should help us perhaps move to the next level. You have made very good suggestions, Senator Wetangula, Senator Olekina, Senator Kamar, Senator Sakaja, very good suggestions on how we can think without the box and unlock this stalemate. The one suggestion is to accept that if you look at the law, Article 222, 223, 224, there is no solution. This situation has not been captured anywhere. It talks about, for example, the national government being able to spend even without an Appropriations Act and seek approval later. Doesn't talk about county governments. And in fact, out of those three articles, the only article that applies to county government, none of them actually, but there are regulations, the 2015 regulations on county governments, which perhaps say county government can spend up to 50% of what they were entitled to in the previous year, but only where they have not passed appropriation bills, meaning the money should already be in the counties, and the trouble is how to spend it, as opposed to what we have now, where the money is in the national treasury and has not moved to counties. So this is a sui generis or a special kind of a crisis, but I'm convinced one way or the other we will get it unlocked. Desperate times call for radical and desperate measures. And accordingly, I want to urge us that we be ready to come back as soon as possible, subject to the procedures that are needed. But for us to be able to engage further on this matter, our Committee on Finance and Budget must help us, being our sectoral committee that is responsible. I therefore would like the chairperson and members of the committee to just bear with us, as much as we may have made arrangements for the recess. You may have to hang on a little bit and do for us some groundwork in the next 7 days as follows. I see no reason and I see no other superior duty that could be preventing the CS for the National Treasury and other relevant people, including the Controller of Budget, the Attorney General, from actually appearing before you in the shortest time possible. Therefore, because we cannot have a country like this. We can't have a country which is, running outside the law. And on the issue of the Appropriations Act, which the national government is using, our position is that that is an unlawful legislation. And therefore, I direct the chair, the Committee on Finance and Budget, to look for the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, wherever he may be found. To look also for the Controller of Budget, wherever she may be found. To look for the Chairperson of the Council of Governors, wherever he may be. To look for the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya, in whichever part of the world or the country he may be. To look for the Cabinet Secretary for devolution, wherever he is, whatever he is doing, to appear before you in a sitting on Tuesday. And that meeting should not adjourn until between all those officials of state and our committee of this House on Budget and Finance provides a solution for the Republic of Kenya on this matter. I direct that the CS for the National Treasury, the CS for the Ministry of Devolution, the national government, the Controller of Budget, the Chairperson of the Council of Governors, the Attorney General should appear before the committee on Tuesday without fail and without delegation. And finally, I direct the committee after the consultations on Tuesday to submit a report to the Speaker of the Senate within 7 days. And thereafter, the Speaker of the Senate, in consultation with the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader, will discuss how to push that report forward, with my suggestion being that we need a special sitting. In that special sitting, we'll discuss the recommendations and the findings that will be in that report tabled by the committee. And from there, that sitting, because the special sitting has specific agenda, must also provide all the necessary resolutions that are required to protect any officer or public office that may be required to use administrative measures to unlock the stalemate to ensure that counties start receiving monies before the end of this month. There might be some resolutions which needs to be made to allow, for example, the Controller of Budget to take certain measures so that whoever wants to take action against her is covered, or rather is prohibited by the resolution of the House. And therefore, in a nutshell, dear colleagues, we are on standby. We proceed on recess, but we are on standby. The Committee on Budget and Finance, the country is looking up to you. And finally, to all the officers whom I have mentioned, be informed that on Tuesday, you are directed to suspend any other business and appear before the Committee on Finance so that thereafter we can tell the country when the counties are getting their monies, because it is my view that we cannot have another end month without counties having money in their banks. Thank you. Very well, thank you, colleagues. Thank you, senators. I think we have exhausted that issue of statements. We can now go back to our Lindai Senator, Professor Kamar. So I direct that we call out the order on papers and then the order on notices of motion after that. And then after that, now we proceed with the other orders. Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Senator Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the Senate today, Thursday, the 8th, August 2019. The first report is the report of the 51st session of the African Caribbean Pacific ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the intersessional meetings of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. And the second one, Mr. Speaker, is the report of the 52nd session of the African Caribbean Pacific ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the 36th session of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly.
Thank you, Senator Kamar. Before we go to the next order, regarding the matter which I have just disposed, I want to further direct the clerk to ensure that the invitations or summons, as the case may be, to the persons whom I have identified shall be accompanied by the Hansard report, which must include the directives of the chair and the comments made by senators this afternoon on this matter. So ordered. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Senator Professor Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to give a notice that this House notes the report of the Parliament of the Kenya delegation to the 51st session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the intersessional meetings of the ACP EU Parliamentary Assembly held in Brussels, Belgium, from the 9th to the 11th October 2018, and the 52nd session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the 36th session of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Cotonou, Benin, from 25th November to the 5th December 2018, both laid on the table of the House on Thursday, the 8th August 2019. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we shall go to order number 9 first, and then later on we can come back to order number 8 when Senator Kasanga is in the chamber. So let's go to order number 9. Next order.
Order number 9, a motion, retirement age for persons with disabilities in public service and in academia.
Order Senators. Senator Musuruve, you were moving this motion, and you had a reminder of 15 minutes to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And I started moving this motion yesterday, And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, when we look at persons with disabilities, they are disadvantaged from an early age, even when they are little children. And Mr. Speaker, when parents have children with disabilities, they do not take them to school immediately. In fact, they move from pillar to post, getting so frustrated about their children, not knowing what is going on, in the lives of their children, so they take too long to even take them to school. So when it comes to entry to school, they do not start at the same age with their peers. When other children, regular children, begin school at 5 years, you'll find, Mr. Speaker, these children begin school at the age of 10 or even 15. So I want to say, Mr. Speaker, even apart from that, the issue of them being assessed in order to really begin school takes a long time. So, and even, Mr. Speaker, when they are already in their parents' care, most parents even prefer educating their other siblings, and they do not prioritize children with disabilities. So as individuals from from a young age, they're actually disadvantaged. And Mr. Speaker, even when these children go to school, they're even disadvantaged in terms of curriculum, and you'll find, Madam Speaker, sometimes even the curriculum has not been fine-tuned for them to really cope up with exams. And I want to give an example of what happens in early childhood. In most schools, you'll find that children as young as 4 years are prepared to get by with the school curriculum. And you'll find even little children even speaking, language very fluently, speaking English very fluently, speaking Kiswahili very fluently. When they go back to their parents really get amazed. But for children with disabilities, there's nothing to amaze their parents, because when the children go back to school, back home, in fact, they do not go with, anything to show that they seem to be getting anywhere. So when it comes to even preparation at national level of exams, you find these children have not been prepared adequately in order to cope by. And even when it comes to, Form 4, they have not been adequately prepared to cope by. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, that even when they go to colleges and universities, from an early age, they've been disadvantaged. And so when they get papers, most of the time the papers they get are not really papers that will help them, compete at the workplace. But with time, some of these children, out of their own accord, realize that they need to, they can struggle and get by. So using their own initiative, you'll find that some of them even, surpass what they learned in school, because in school they've been disadvantaged. And you find that by the time they mature up, at the age of 20, 25, that is when now they begin now going to colleges, diploma colleges, because at the end of the day, they have their own lives to live. And Madam Speaker, while other children also leave university maybe at the age of 24, 23, 24, and they get job placements, you'll find, Madam Speaker, children who also finish college and have disabilities, at university level, they get problems getting into the job market. And why am I saying it like this, Madam Speaker? It is because employers even shy off from employing persons with disabilities, even in a situation where persons with disabilities have papers. And I want to say on the floor of this House, Madam Speaker, there are so many persons with disabilities who have finished college in this country. They have papers, but when it comes to employment, you will find that organizations fear to employ them. People are not ready to employ them because of that fear of, you have to have an aid, you have to do what. So employers want to be incentivized. So I want to say, Madam Speaker, they really get difficulties. In fact, most of the places where university, college students go, PWDs, when they finish college, they get into charity organizations. You'll find many charity organizations just using them to do research, to do this and that. Sometimes they're used as rubber stamps. And yet they have the brains, yet they have the papers. So it is a very unfortunate situation that happens in this country, Madam Speaker. So I want to say that by the time persons with disabilities, by God's grace, end up getting jobs, probably at the age of 35 or even 40, that time, they have very little time in order to give back to the society, in order to be service providers. So when it comes to age limit of retirement, the age limit of retirement of 60 years disadvantages them in the public service, and there's need for them to be given more time in order to give back to the society, in order to be productive. I want to say, Madam Speaker, on the floor of this House, persons with disabilities are supposed to be service providers as well. They're not supposed to be just on the receiving end. So I want to say, Madam Speaker, there's need to really ensure that we are raising the age limit for the persons with disabilities in the public service. And I want to say also, Madam Speaker, on the floor of this House, there's a policy that came out sometime, I'm not so certain about the year, probably 2009, that actually raised the retirement age. And when it was raised for public service servants, you'll find that people are retiring at 55 years, and then they were raised to 60. So that same policy stated that persons with disabilities in the public service need to retire at 65. But, Madam Speaker, as you're speaking right now, what is happening on the ground is not really being implemented. Because in some organizations, yes, they're retiring at 65. In other organizations, they're not retiring at 65. Madam Speaker, I have a case of a teacher who is the deputy in a school in one of the counties, in fact, in Haniri's county. He was given a letter by the TAC, and the letter was dated February, telling him that he needs to retire next year, and yet he's a deputy, Madam Speaker. And the policy says that public servants are supposed to retire at 65. So there's need to ensure that these policies are really being implemented for persons with disabilities, and they're done in an equal way, and they're done in a fair way. Madam Speaker, I also want to talk about issues of universities. At university level in academia, lecturers retire at the age of 70 years. But I want to say, Madam Speaker, by the time persons with disabilities are really getting those papers, the highest degree on the land in order to teach in universities, at that time, you'll find that maybe some of them are 60 years, some of them are even that 65, because of the very many challenges they've had during, their early years, as they're trying to really catch up, as they're trying to really, so by the time they self-actualize in academia, you'll find that they're about 60, around maybe 65, 60. So this motion actually intends to ensure that even persons with disabilities in academia need to retire, instead of retiring at 70, let them retire at 75. And Madam Speaker, just allow me to give an example of someone who has really gone up the ladder in academia, a person with a disability, Professor Ndurumo. I want to say, Madam Speaker, on the floor of this House, Professor Ndurumo is the father of sign language in this country. He has not been recognized. He does not have a voice. There's no one to speak for him, but he's highly intelligent. There's so much he can give to this country, but he has not been given an opportunity to really even give back to the society, even an eighth of what he has. So I want to say, Madam Speaker, at 75 years, if this Professor Ndurumo, I think Professor Ndurumo could be around 70, maybe reaching 70 in 2 years. So when he retires, what are we going to do with the input he has? He has a lot of intelligence that needs to give back to this country. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, by the time PWDs are also at 70 in academic level, I want to say that there's need for them to be there in order to mentor other PWDs. Because when PWDs are also in academia at the age of 75, other PWDs will see that it's possible to reach that height, Madam Speaker. So I want to say, candidly, and I want to say without fear, and I want to say that there's need for a policy to come in place, a policy that needs to work, a policy that will not just be said on the floor of this House, and it doesn't work. A policy to ensure that persons with disabilities who are in universities and university-affiliated colleges retire at the age of 75. And for persons with disabilities in the public service to retire at 65 years. And it should not just be retire at 65 years. It should be something that is practiced. There should be a practical solution to ensuring that persons with disabilities are also mentoring others. And Madam Speaker, I want to say that when it comes to persons with disabilities, they have seen from a pity paradigm, and most of the time they'll be in charities. Most of the time the potential they have has never been utilized in this country. There is need for this country to ensure that they are making maximum use of persons with disabilities, because there's those who are highly intelligent, there are those who are just talented, multi-talent. Let us make use of that multi-talent in them. Let us nurture the talent, and even those in academia, let us nurture whatever they have, and whatever they have, let them give back intellectually to this country. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the motion and ask Senator Mwaura to second.
Thank you, Senator Mwaura.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg your pardon, Professor. I don't know why. I think I'm so used. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and I really want to congratulate my fellow senator for persons with disabilities, Senator Dr. Gertrude Musuruve, for this motion. And I am very deliberate, Madam Speaker, because in terms of nomenclature, we are the two senators who represent persons with disabilities. You know, people like calling people nominated. The Constitution anticipates senators for women, senators for youth, and senators for persons with disabilities. And that is what we call ourselves, because it is not by coincidence. But of course, there's always the baggage of how nominations used to happen before without any attendant constituency. And that is something we need to correct. Madam Speaker, sometimes people may ask, why is it that are we saying that disabled persons should get an extra 5 years when they are working? It's because if you look at delayed milestones, right, when a child is born with disability, or if you acquire your disability, even when you're a grown-up, it will take some time before you recover. And that time needs to be compensated. Children with disabilities stay for long without going to school because sometimes they are not seen as educable. If you look at it from a utilitarian point of view, parents would rather take another child to school because they think that child will be more beneficial. I mean, if you even were to contextualize this within the gender, you'll find people saying, oh, msichana ataolewa. So for disabled children, they are not seen to be useful. So most of them actually start school late. Part of it also is because some of them will not be accepted in certain schools. And we have had to deal with so many cases of children who have been denied access to school. I've had to personally intervene in some cases. And it is not just even at the primary level, all the way at the university. Even with C+ being the minimum university requirement, I've had to push for some students to get this access. And some of them have gone ahead and graduated, but they are older than their colleagues. So the retirement age is some form of reparation. If it is increased by 5 years, to assuage the effect of this loss. That is a principle, so that then senators can understand where this is coming from. Madam Speaker, in this, our own, very own Senate, there is a young lady who is employed here, and she was not disabled, but last year she got an accident, and she lost her husband, and she lost her leg. She's just come back to work, but she's still adapting. Rebecca Maranto. So this can affect all of us. It's a clear case, a clear example. So when we are talking about disability, we are trying to cushion that eventuality if it were to happen. In fact, most of the time we say that disability is a club and anybody can be a member. So Madam Speaker, if you look at the Persons with Disabilities Act, number 14 of 2003, it provides for reservation of employment to persons with disabilities under Section 13. But that 5% reservation that is strengthened by Article 54, Sub-Article 2, is progressive and is not mandatory. So we have seen a higher number of persons with disabilities retiring from public service if you are to compare the ratio with those who are being absorbed in the public service. Why? Because these clauses, or article for that matter, have not been properly drafted and legislated as to occasion the threshold to be attained. Article 81 of the Constitution is clear that persons with disabilities should have fair representation. And so, Madam Speaker, in the 11th Parliament, through my own motion, we were able to increase that age to 65 through a legislation. But as Senator Gertrude Musuruve has said, it is not being implemented. There are people still who are supposed to benefit, but they only get the shock of getting their retirement letter. And this needs to stop. And it's not just about retirement age, Madam Speaker. If you look at the minimum accessibility standards, they are there in law. Sections 21, 22, 23, 24, 39, and 40 of the Persons with Disabilities Act are very clear about adjustments, modifications, even of vehicles. But our matatus, the chassis, if you look at it, it is actually meant for a lorry. That is why wheelchair users may find it difficult. So we have laws that are not being implemented. Laws that may have come through this august house by way of motion and then legislation, and now we are coming back again to do the very motions to ensure the very implementation. So what does that speak? That the law by itself has ceased to be a means to an end. In fact, Madam Speaker, we've just come from representing the Senate under the BBI with Senator Wetangula, Senator Ochilo, Senator Fatuma, and myself, and we had Senator Shionga and Senator Abshiro. And that is a question that everyone is grappling with. How comes that there's a failure of the rule of law? Persons with disabilities are mentioned 18 times in the Kenyan Constitution, 18 times, followed by women at 9 times and youth at six times. But we have not seen a post-disability society with the advent of the 2010 Constitution. We have not seen public buildings becoming more accessible. We've not seen employers taking advantage, for example, of Section 15 of the Persons with Disabilities Act in order to claim allowable expenses to the tax authority for the modifications they make so that they can provide for reasonable accommodation towards persons with disabilities. Kenya has been cited as the first amongst equals around the inclusion of persons with disabilities, primarily because of the provisions of the Constitution. But then, people do not eat laws. You have your laws, so what? What purpose do they serve? If a disabled teacher can be denied access to her legitimate 5 years of continued service in order to continue taking care of the family. Madam Speaker, there is also the point about disability and medical care. These two are inseparable. Sometimes people do not understand disability, and it is good I take this opportunity to explain. Disability is a social construct that results from the interactions between persons with various forms of impairments. And there can be as many impairments as there are individuals, physical, mental, visual, name them. And that is on one hand, and environmental or attitudinal barriers on the other hand. So disability can be deconstructed. Disabilities like gender, impairment may be biological, it could be congenital, but disability is sociological. Just like gender is sociological, but sex is biological. And we are making strides. That is why, for the first time in the upcoming census, we are going to count intersex people through the instrumental support of others, including yours truly. This year's census, we are going to be looking at that as well. But we are moving away from the medical model. We will be asking the question, can you see properly using glasses? So yes, a little bit with difficulty or not at all. So that we are able to capture as many people with disabilities so that the data can be usable. And I was very privileged to be part of the technical working group on the same. And so this data, when we have it, what do we do with it if we cannot keep our people with disabilities in employment? What are we going to do with the information we have gotten from Huduma number if people who are of various impairments and who need constant medical attention are being denied the opportunity to earn a decent living by way of being retired illegally? When you come to academia, generally professors retire at the age of 70. But then because the age of 65 for the public service already is so stipulated, then the members of the faculty who happen to be disabled are not being accorded the extra 5 years. So this motion seeks to confer the equal benefit to members of the academy so that they too can continue to contribute. And by the way, you may ask, what is the utilitarian value of keeping a disabled person in office? I mean, disabled people don't move a lot around. They take their work very seriously. They are very diligent. And the best example we have is none other than Senator Musuruve. She's always here. I mean, you don't need to go anywhere further. She's here. That is what many are able to do. And in fact, some research that was done by Synovate proved that when given the necessary facilities, they are able to have more productivity than an average worker. And you can even get that from Safaricom, is the biggest employer of disabled people. They have a target of having 5% of employees by 2021, and I hope they can get it. Now they're at 1%. And we are working with other employers like Barclays Bank, like L'Oreal, recently ShopRite, just to ensure that there is a special measure to actually include persons with disability within the programs of diversity and inclusion. You have to make a deliberate effort. Otherwise, on average, the stories that people have when they are looking for employment is that, yes, on a prima facie basis, you make an application, but when you appear before the interview panel, they don't know how to deal with you. I am reminded of Dr. Reginald Odwor, who is a professor of philosophy at the University of Nairobi. He had taught in KU, but when he was applying for that position at the University of Nairobi, the panel couldn't help but ask him, how will you mark? Yet he had always been marking papers. Recently, we had a meeting at SRC, Dr. Musuruve, you can remember. And we have been able to successfully push for every person within the public service who is disabled to get an aid, equivalent to the position that they hold, and in terms of their. So it is a question of also facilitating those with disabilities to perform their duties. And that way, if you look at it from a social welfare model, you are then reducing the burden of the state in having to take care of these individuals through these programs such as cash transfer, Inua Jamii, and all of that. Because if you can give somebody some work and they can deliver, then you don't have to take care of them by giving them arms or handouts. In fact, when you employ a person with disability, when you keep him or her into the public service, it is not a hand out, it is a hand up. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished senators, I really want to implore upon you to consider this. This is not a superfluous motion. It is not a necessary motion. It's not a filibuster motion. It's a motion to ensure that the rights so conferred to persons with disabilities by dint of the constitutional provisions and by statutory provisions as well get some life. It is putting some fun into flame so that then we can have an equitable society for persons with disabilities. Madam Speaker, I beg to second.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the motion that aware that persons with disabilities and their families are among the world's poorest and are disadvantaged in terms of their late entry into the labor force, further aware that the reality of employing disabled people does not match the presumptions held by employers, the influence of how they think about disability remains a potent issue for disabled people seeking to work. Cognizant that Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, UNCRPD, affirms the equal right of all persons with disabilities to live in a community with choices equal to others and with equal access to services and facilities that are responsive to their needs, noting that unlike current trends around the world, employers in Kenya are not incentivized to employ persons with disabilities, and therefore most public organizations and parastatals have not yet achieved the threshold of Article 54(2) of the Kenya Constitution that obligates 5% appointments of PWDs in elective and appointed positions, noting that, concerned that Article 27E of the UNCRPD advocates for party states, of which Kenya is one, to promote employment opportunities and career advancements of PWDs in the labor market, as well as assistance in finding, obtaining, maintaining, and returning to employment. Now, therefore, the Senate calls upon the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection and county governments to develop a policy to ensure that, 1, PWDs in gainful employment in public service retire at the age of 65 years instead of 60 years, and 2, PWDs in academia, such as universities and colleges, retire at the age of 75 years instead of 70 years. Senator Kabaka Boniface Mutinda.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving this opportunity this afternoon as we close the session. First, I wish to congratulate the Senator Musurove for bringing this motion, very important motion, I would say, that seeks extension period of the retirement age for persons with disabilities in public service and in the academia realm. Senator Musurove, supported by distinguished Senator Dr. Mwaura, yes, CBS, you've really presented passionately and supported this motion, and I would say with equal strength and might, I will endeavor also to support this motion. And without much ado, it's very clear that the mover of the motion has given a nice synthesis of the international laws that deals with persons with such challenges. She has cited Article 19 of United Nations, CRPD. She has also cited our local position where we have domesticated the similar international law. In replica, the Kenyan Constitution, Article 54, subsection 2, indeed has bequeathed what I can say a marginal percentage of 5%. For me, I would have said when we are revisiting the amendment of the Constitution, when the opportunity knocks the door, we even need to add it, even double, even triple, so that persons who have that challenge can also benefit. There is also other area which, in the legal realm, which also need to be amended, which have not been mentioned. Other enabling statutes that deals with employment and labor laws. Indeed, if, as suggested by the mover of the motion, the period is going to change from 60 years to 65 in the civil service, and from 70 years to 75 in academia realm, then indeed that need to be captured in the other employment plethoras of statutes. If indeed, Madam Speaker, courses of action in law are delayed or are deemed not to run because of challenges like physical disability, like in the torts or rather of personal injuries, which is normally 3 years, then I don't see any problem, Madam Speaker, if this period can be extended by only 5 years. I think 5 years extension is not asking too much, having taken cognizance of the fact that persons with physical challenges or even mental states of disability, if I may say, they take a while to acclimatize to the environment. And if indeed any one of us can wake up tomorrow being disabled because of attacks or even accidents or anything, or act of God, then it calls upon, this motion calls upon each and every one of us to support it fully. And I support, Madam Speaker, and urge the other speakers to accelerate this motion without much ado. Madam Speaker, as I sit, I support. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Masitsa Naomi Shionga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support the motion by the able Senator Musurube on retirement age for persons with disability. Madam Speaker, it is true that the persons with disability face a lot of challenges during or at their youthful days or in their youthful days. Madam Speaker, this contributes to the delay in acquiring all that is intended into their lives, especially in the education, marriage, and any other social undertakings. It is therefore with this that I support this statement of adding or increasing their age, especially on the academia to 75. Madam Speaker, socially, this kind of people, most of them are stigmatized. However, they are not only stigmatized because of their disability, but mostly when you get disability when you are mature or when they are mature, it really derails their morale of living, it really derails their economical gains, and it puts them in another corner that they need to start life afresh. Recognition also goes down with the society, with the same people, and most of them, even if they're in the setup that is normal, they need to change the environment that they are living in or they live in. At times, Madam Speaker, this one calls even for aid, whereby if these people they are not economically well up, they end up having or being discouraged in life. It is with this that I call and I support my colleague in extension of their retirement age from the previous times to 75 years, where disability is acquired again in maturity, stabilization in routine work or undertaking. It is interfered with, hence time is taken, and they are vulnerable, and it is very hard to continue with their lives as much. Most of us live in communities or societies where we have these people, and some are relatives, or they are people we are born with. It is with this that we do not need to pretend that these people pass through challenges. These people get challenges. These people, most of them, especially when you are in rural area and you are disabled, it becomes very hard to acquire infrastructure and facilities that can enable you go back to the roadmap and work as normal. Because the structure that one is used to needs to automatically change. And our economic or the economic constraint that we experience nowadays gives somebody a low morale or upbeat of achieving what he needs to do to continue with life. I am certain that most of the legislation that are given to these persons or category of persons are not implemented, or they are not adhered to. Therefore, the laws that we are passing here, and including this law, needs to be amended, needs to be implemented so that we can facilitate the lifestyle and the livelihood of these persons. And even the time frame that they need to work needs to be improved, needs to be prolonged, needs to be extended. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Mbogo George Ochilo Ayako.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to this very important motion. And Madam Speaker, I want to appreciate Senator Naomi Shionga. She had requested to speak before me. And I generally understand that disability is made worse by marginalization. And I know that the topic about women in this country is also made worse because of marginalization. So it was out of the desire to put women in front that I acceded that she speaks before me, and I am happy to be a practical person. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Museruve, Senator, to be for thinking about the disabled persons. Being a disabled person herself, Madam Speaker, I was talking to her and she told me that up to 2013, she was like any one of us who purport or who claim not to be disabled, and it's because of an ailment, cancer, that she has.
It's a point of order from the Senator of Nairobi.
Madam Speaker, even as we support this motion, Madam Speaker, I think it is proper for us to know the proper terms to use. I think in this new regime of dealing with this sector, they are referred to as persons living with disability, not disabled persons. Maybe Senator Musuruve can guide us, because I've seen Senator Ochilo Ayako calling her a disabled person and she has smiled, a very big smile. Is that the term that is used? And should we continue using that term, or is it persons living with disability?
Senator Musuruve, maybe you could tell us this, because a lot of us have been corrected in various quarters.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And I just want to thank Senator Sakaja for being very sensitive about issues of disability. And it's true, yes, we talk of persons with disabilities, not even living with disabilities, but persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you are well informed, Senator Yako.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We keep on learning, and those of us who want progress must be open to learning. Those of us who want to stay where we are must be impervious to learning. So I accept that piece of information, and it's important. I was saying that Senator Mseruve was living a normal life, and life is full of its own programs. So her current condition was something she did not invite. Her current condition invaded her very active life. She had written books about disability. She had trained a disabled person, and she was a leading proponent and advocate for persons living with disability. So when she was visited with this tragic situation, here she is. It has not impaired or disabled her ability to articulate matters affecting persons living with disability. But again, Madam Speaker, she's an asset. She's a knowledgeable person, and her bringing of this motion is a testimony to her commitment to the cause of everybody who is living with any condition that disables them, or anybody with the potential of suffering that kind of condition. All of us who are here have that potential. Any day that you go through that day without any incident, you thank God. In the National Assembly, in my previous tenure, we were at the National Assembly with 2 members of National Assembly. We had Honorable Shidie, and we also had our whip at that particular time. In one innocent Thursday evening, they had gone to town to do what all members do, shop for their families. They got shot, and one of them got disabled and returned to the house in a wheelchair. We also know that the member for Kamukunji also suffered a similar incident. So as we legislate this, we must know that the line between living normally or living with a condition that makes you disabled is very thin. It can happen to anybody, and it happens anytime. So, Madam Speaker, the point I'm trying to make is that the nature of society in which we live, the kind of society that we want to build, must be a society that is able to put in place programs that take care of the less fortunate people, that take care of the less advantaged people. And if we do not do so, I can assure you our turn is on the way. Such misfortunes may invade our families, may invade our children, may invade our spouses, may also invade our parents. So when we have this kind of platform, we should encourage such motions. We should graduate the motions into legislation so that we have a legislative framework that is able to support this kind of situation. If you look at the public service and the private sector, there is a general policy that 5% of employees of those sectors should be persons who are living with disability. That policy is not implemented, and there is no incentive absolutely to implement that policy. Persons with disability start from a disadvantaged position. You will notice that first, they will be unable to mix normally with our normal children, and therefore on their own, without any kind of incentive, they may not acquire the skills and the resources to be able to compete evenly with us. So it is our duty, both as an institution and individuals, to ensure that we encourage persons with disability to work hard. We encourage persons with disability to acquire competences, to acquire skills, to get into business. We are also duty-bound to encourage guardians or people who support persons with disability not to hide them, Most of our disabled relatives are hidden in back rooms, they are hidden in places, so that because families are embarrassed to say that, my sister is blind, my daughter has this kind of disability. We keep them at home for too long because we appear to be afraid of being associated with such people. So we must put in place policies that give incentives. We give incentives to these persons themselves because it is them living with the burden of trying to live a normal life, and also their guardians or the people around them to be able to bring them forward so that they can be streamlined into normal activities of society. And one of the ways of giving incentive to disabled persons is to support this motion and tell them that if you train and if you have capacity, you seek employment and you get employed, you will be able to work until you are up to 65 years of age. I think that is not asking too much. That is being decent, that is being nice, and that is being a person who cares about society. You care about society in two ways. You give incentive to a disabled person to work hard and seek employment, but you also ensure that disabled person does not double depend on society by seeking gifts or handouts from government when they retire too early. They need to support themselves because they are decent people and because they deserve to be decently treated. Nobody wants to be a beggar. Nobody wants their options to be limited such that you are disabled, you may not go to your local market, and you have also to beg for money even to send somebody to go to that market on your behalf. So it is important for us to ensure that the policy that is already in place, that disabled persons should be in employment up to the age of 65, is implemented to the letter, and a penalty or a sanction is associated or attributed to those who want to retire a disabled person before the age of 65 who are ordinarily working. Now, it is very rare to come by people in academia, particularly universities, who are disabled persons. And because of the rarity, I am sure that even to ask that the retirement age be moved from 70 to 75 will not be asking too much. In fact, there are very few professors who are professors suffering from disability. Madam Speaker, you are a professor yourself. I am sure in your institution you couldn't count many. I have a friend called Professor Joe Malo. We worked at the Kenya Nuclear Electricity Board. He was disabled, but a very able professor, and him and I and other people were able to steer that organization to great heights. So when the mover of the motion and the owner of the motion proposes that people in academia, particularly ones with disability, should be given a few more years of service, I think that is a wonderful proposal that is going to encourage our persons with disability to continue excelling in academia, since they are already few, and they are very few. If we give them incentive, majority of them who may be holders of PhD or masters may continue doing research, they may continue writing, and they may continue dispensing services, this very rare skill as professors beyond the age of 70. Madam Speaker, this is a very good proposition. I just want to encourage the mover to think of other more opportunities that we should afford our persons with disability, so that we don't just start and stop with extending their contract of employment. I believe we owe it to society, we owe it to God, we owe it to everybody to do much more for persons with disability. And Senator Mwaura, who spoke and seconded this motion, I would have wished that he spoke more about how people misunderstand the disability of being an albino. Many people may not understand how it is a disability. We may just be speaking. I wish he had explained more. It is a disability. People treat them differently. People tend to marginalize them. And it is something that we should be sensitive towards. With those very many remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to support.
Thank you. Senator Sakaja Johnson, other.
Madam Speaker, Senator Musuruve has continued to distinguish herself as a true champion for the people for whom she was elected by party list to represent in the Senate. And Madam Speaker, as chairman of the Committee of Labor, where she is a strong member, I just wanted to know that I'm extremely proud of the work that she's been doing and how she adds value to our committee together with Senator Maura when it comes to dealing with matters of persons with disability. And possibly that is why I knew the proper term to use. Madam Speaker, it has been an evolving journey. I just want to, as I support this motion, propose a few lines of thought, Madam Speaker. First of all, that we are in a constitutional dispensation that indeed has at its core a human rights. Rights are at the core. The Bill of Rights stand at the core of our Constitution, Madam Speaker. And I want to propose that matters of disability are both human rights issues, and that's a human rights approach that is now being used in line with the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability, CRPD, to which Kenya is a signatory to. Many years ago, James Wolfenson, the former president of the World Bank, said that unless disabled people are brought into the development mainstream, it will be impossible to cut poverty in half by 2015, or to give every girl and boy the chance to achieve a primary education by the same date. Goals agreed to by more than 180 world leaders at the UN Millennial Summit in September 2000. Many, many years later, Madam Speaker, we must still see it in the same manner. Former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said that growth will not by itself guarantee that most people in a country have the chance to live lives of dignity and fulfillment. A healthy society is one that takes care of all its members and gives them a chance to participate in decisions that affect their lives. So, Madam Speaker, we take a human rights approach to disability and a human rights approach to development as a country, because our Constitution says that international law, international treaties form part of our law. And that is why as a country we are bound to the treaties of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability. And I'm glad over the past few years I've been able to attend as head of delegation and also as a member of delegation many sessions of the CRPD, and Kenya is actually making great strides when it comes with it to this, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just quite briefly, the proposal that is coming from Senator Musuruve is nothing much to ask for, Madam Speaker. In fact, this should just be passed quickly so that we can continue to look at larger interventions. A human rights approach will tell you that a child who is living with disability needs to have an equal opportunity at life, an equal shot at life as a child who is not. Madam Speaker, a human rights-based approach will tell you that all of us actually need a hand up when it comes to accessing opportunities. It's just that our level of inaccessibility is different. Madam Speaker, if you come to KCC and there were no stairs and there's no lift, none of us would be able to come to my office on the 26th floor. But we have provided stairs for those of us who can only walk and a lift. But when we fail to provide further for those who maybe have a disability that is of a physical nature, then we're actually denying them their rights of being able to access the same opportunity that is provided for the next person, Madam Speaker. And that is the way of thinking. The conventional way had been to look at disability as an abnormality, to look at it as a medical condition, and those are the aspects. And Senator Chilo Yako has just told us how even those of us who for now are not living with disability, anything can happen. He forgot to mention a member from his county, Migori, who in the last parliament was actually, able-bodied, but she got an accident. And it took her to get an accident, because I used to sit with her at the House Business Committee in the National Assembly. It took her to get an accident for us to realize that persons with disability cannot access the first floor of Parliament, because she could no longer attend meetings of the committee because the lifts had not been working for months and months, Madam Speaker. So unless we open our eyes to see how our friends, our colleagues are disadvantaged socially, economically, even politically, Madam Speaker, then we will not be able to have meaningful interventions to address these issues. Madam Speaker, there was a research paper that I just want to quickly quote that I had looked at a while ago, that talks about a rights-based approach, because this is what we're really dealing with. This is by the Southern African Federation of the Disabled, Disability Dialogue Issue number 4, SAFOD. It says that a rights-based approach to disability and development is about leveling the playing field so that people with disabilities can access jobs, education, health, and other services. A rights-based approach is about the removal of physical and social barriers, just as I've explained with the two examples of KICC and even Parliament buildings. It's about attitude adjustments for policymakers, employers, teachers, healthcare professionals, and even family members. A rights-based approach is about ensuring universal design, accessible technology, and coordinated public programs and service. The approach requires government to provide the resources necessary to implement these goals and to enforce penalties for those who refuse to cooperate. So, Senator Musuruve, without legislators like you in the House, in the National Assembly, it is very easy for other legislators to ignore or not to think about such interventions, because that is not what comes at the top of their mind, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm glad that even in the county of Nairobi, I've been able, with a lot of partners, to see beyond what would be pretty obvious to you when it comes even to looking at children, to actually provide facilities for persons living with disability. And I'm glad, and as I've said here before in the House, one of the greatest champions, who is a good friend of mine and happens to be sister to our senator from Kajiado, who runs a program for children, were able to, Madam Speaker, with help of the President and the First Lady, to donate to her even a bus that has a facility for her to go around the slums of Nairobi to pick up children and take them to a center where even certain support returns them back to normal. Because of poverty in a lot of the parts in this city, you find that many parents, you'll find the mother, all she does laundry work, and she gets 100 shillings a day, 150 shillings a day, and she has no caregiver. She has no one to take care of the child. So what do? They lock up these children in their slums. And these children are kept almost like goats in a pen for years. So you've stifled the ability of that mother to provide for that child, and for that child to get better or to get an education. So you create a vicious cycle of poverty. And because of that, I think we've been able to help a few. We hope that we can be able to do more. Madam Speaker, it is clear that entry to the job market is delayed for persons who live with disability because of first of all, the education process. I happened to go to a primary school where we had a deaf unit for those the children who are deaf. And we'd find them when we come to class 1, and they would take many more years to finish than we would. Meaning, somebody would be entering the job market once they go to high school and university, possibly at the age of 30, or even 30, 32, 33. Yet you entered at maybe 23 or 24. So it follows, Madam Speaker, that there should be also an extension at the other end of the spectrum for them to be able to have a delayed retirement age. Madam Speaker, similarly, even as we look at that side of the spectrum, it's important for us to consider what measures are being put in place to encourage and incentivize the employment by private sector of persons living with disability who are young, Madam Speaker. We have a huge problem with unemployment, and it follows then that even within the disability sphere of things, those who are young also are very much more disadvantaged. Government in itself, because the government is one that follows strictly limitations of retirement age, whether it is national or county government and government agencies, is not the biggest employer in any economy. The biggest employer is the private sector. How do we incentivize the private sector to employ more persons living with disability and to make true to the affirmation of the Constitution that at least 5% must be employed? Madam Speaker, the easiest and quickest way is tax-based incentives. Madam Speaker, if you give tax relief, even if it's through pay as you earn, to companies in the private sector that have a certain percentage of persons living with disability. If, for instance, I am employing 5 people at 50,000 and I get an incentive of 50,000, I'm able to employ another extra person using that tax relief, and or even use that money to expand my business, Madam Speaker. We should be able to find a way where these incentives, which many times are just pronouncements made during the finance bill or the reading of the budget, are actually practically implemented, Madam Speaker. And that's something that I'm really willing to push as chair of Labour Committee, together with Finance and Budget Committee, because these pronouncements, we've had them for many, many years. If we look at that end of the spectrum, we'll be able to make any entrepreneur, any private organization, any multinational, be more encouraged and inspired to actually look out for these persons with disability. Madam Speaker, as I move to close, I see time is not good. We need to also look at the built environment. This country actually has a standard by the Kenya National Bureau of Standards on building. But Madam Speaker, if you go to, and you've traveled, I think I've even traveled with you to many countries around the world. If you look at the curbs or the pavements, the ending of the pavement is never the abrupt ending. It is a gradual ending where a wheelchair can use it as a ramp. When you tell policymakers in Kenya that we need to have that, they say, but we don't see people with wheelchairs in the streets. But that is the reason you don't see people with wheelchairs on the streets, because the streets are not built or created for them to be able to move. So it is not a matter of the egg and the chicken, but it's actually providing for them. Actually, if you go to many of these states, with, at the junction, you'll find a lot of dots. The texture changes. So if somebody is walking with a cane and they're blind, they know this is where the street has ended and I need to stop. If you look at the buses, we have standards in Kenya, and I will share this with Senator Musuruve. We have building standards even that show you this is the width of the door of a toilet. This is the how you put props for somebody who's using a wheelchair or who is blind to be able to touch and tell. In a lift, this is how, yes, you write lift, first floor, second floor, third floor, but there is braille that is incorporated even in lifts in buildings that we should actually ensure are implemented, Madam Speaker. We need to make sure, Madam Speaker, that public transport, and especially now that we're talking about the buses that are coming to Nairobi for mass transit, here they're coming from South Africa, wherever they're coming from, are they disability friendly? Is the entry low enough? Is the width of the door wide enough, Madam Speaker? If we don't provide for these people, Madam Speaker, who will? The strength of a country, and I keep saying it even if I sound like a broken record, Senator Daumi, a strength of a country is not the size of its military or the amount of dollars in its central bank. It is what it does for the most vulnerable in society. That is how you know this is a country that is strong, Madam Speaker. And I believe we all aspire for our country, Kenya, to remain a strong country. So I support this motion wholeheartedly, and I hope we can even move it to becoming even a bill, Madam Speaker, that we can amend, whether it is the Employment Act, possibly that's what we need to amend. We need to amend certain aspects of the Finance Act that came certain provisions, the Income Tax Act, Pay As You Earn, to actually provide these incentives. I think we should stop saying that government should do the incentives. We are legislators, so we are the ones who should provide those incentives. Let government assent or refuse to assent, but let us make our mark known. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Senator Musuruve.
There are no more requests, and I therefore call upon the mover to reply.
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I beg to reply. Madam Speaker, I want to thank my fellow senators for supporting this motion, and I thank Senator Mwaura, Senator Kabaka, Senator Shionga, Senator Ayako, and Senator Sakaja. And Madam Speaker, for what has really come out strongly from these senators, that everyone is a candidate of disability, and that even as we are in Parliament as legislators, we have to see how to come up with laws that will help in issues of disability. And something that has come out also strongly is that we need to take a human rights approach when we are looking at issues of disability. And it has also come out strongly, Madam Speaker, that we have to acknowledge that PWDs have challenges, and that it has also come out strongly that as a nation we have to endeavor to ensure that we are taking care of our vulnerable if we are to go very far as a nation. It has also come out clearly, Madam Speaker, that PWDs start school late. They have a bout of challenges that eventually affect them, even in the job market, and they're not able to get the job market, to enter the job market at the right age. And it has also come out clearly from the legislators that asking for an extension of 5 years for PWDs in the public service, that is to 65 years retirement, and 75 years for PWDs in academia and constituent colleges is not really something commendable, and everyone has supported this. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, I also thank my fellow senators, and Senator Sakaja has come out strongly, and it's important for Kenyans to know this, that this should not just stop here as a motion. It should go into a bill. And Madam Speaker, I'm sure after this session, Senator Sakaja and I will actually sit together and come up with a bill that will ensure that these issues are factored into law. The issues of giving incentives to employers are factored into law. The issues of retirement, PWD retirement, that is at university level and university constituents, are factored into law. The issues of retirement of PWDs at public service are factored into law. So, Madam Speaker, I want to believe that this motion is not just ending here, because I have all the support from my fellow senators. And thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity, and I beg to reply.
Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 79-1, I find that this matter does not affect counties, and we will therefore proceed to put the question, which is that that aware that persons with disabilities, PWDs, and their families are among the world's poorest and are disadvantaged in terms of their late entry into the labor force. Further aware that the reality of employing disabled people does not match the presumptions held by employers. The influence of how they think about disability remains a potent issue for disabled people seeking to work. Cognizant that Article 19 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, UNCRPD, affirms the equal right of all persons with disabilities to live in a community with choices equal to others and with equal access to our services and facilities that are responsive to their needs. Noting that unlike current trends around the world, employers in Kenya are not incentivized to employ persons with disabilities, and therefore most public organizations and parastatals have not yet achieved the threshold of Article 54(2) of the Kenyan Constitution that obligates 5% appointments of PWDs in elective and appointive positions. Concerned that Article 27E of the UNCRPD advocates for party states, for which Kenya is one, to promote employment opportunities and career advancements of PWDs in the labor market, as well as assistance in finding, obtaining, maintaining, and returning to employment. Now, therefore, the Senate calls upon the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection and county governments to develop a policy to ensure that, 1, PWDs in gainful employment in public service retire at the age of 65 years instead of 60 years, and 2, PWDs in academia such as universities and colleges retire at the age of 75 years instead of 70 years. As many as of that opinion say aye, as many of the contrary opinion say nay, the ayes have it. Honorable Senators, I wish to rearrange the order paper, and pursuant to Standing Order 42, and for our own convenience, I now ask that we proceed to Order 15.
Order number 15, report of the Senate delegation to the 63rd Commission on the Status of Women, CSW 63.
Senator Sakaja.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion, that the Senate notes the report of the Senate delegation to the 63rd Commission on the Status of Women, CSW 63, held in the United Nations, headquarters New York, USA, from the 11th to 22nd of March 2019, laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, the 9th of July 2019. Madam Speaker, maybe a bit of a background or context on this. This year's annual commission on the status of women, CSW, was held in New York between the dates of 11th to 22nd March 2019. I was greatly honored to join the following great women: senators who formed the delegation to the CSW, Senator Susan Kihika, MP, Senator Fatuma Dulo, MP, Senator Beatrice Kwamboka, MP, Senator Judith Pareno, MP, Senator Naomi Shionga, MP, and Senator Falhada Deko. And I was the head of delegation, Madam Speaker. Of the 6 women, I was the luckiest senator in the history of this country, and very proud to lead this delegation as a true champion on issues of women as well as issues of disability, as Senator Musuruve has said. Our delegation was very competently accompanied by Ms. Nyawira Kamau, Secretary to the delegation. And Madam Speaker, I want to, on behalf of the entire delegation, give very special mention to Ms. Nyawira Kamau. Madam Speaker, I've been a legislator since 2013. I have gone to many high-level engagements around the world. I have chaired many meetings and had preparatory, notes prepared and logistics. I have never seen parliamentary staff go out of our way, whether it is producing your notes, whether it is logistical memos, whether it is making sure every member is okay, as Ms. Nyawira Kamau has done. And Madam Speaker, the members asked me to give a special commendation to Ms. Nyawira Kamau for what she was able to do for us. In fact, Madam Speaker, this maybe shouldn't be on record, but it is just in this trip that I realized there are certain things that members of a delegation actually deserve to be sorted out on their behalf that I've never known all these years I've traveled, Madam Speaker. So I commend her, and I wish her well as she continues to work. As I've said, the Senate indeed has a top cream of professionals working, and I want to thank the leadership of the Secretariat of the Senate for providing that leadership. Madam Speaker, the delegation constituted the wider Kenya delegation. There was a wider Kenya government delegation that also included the First Lady of the Republic of Kenya, members of the National Assembly, where there was also only one man, government ministries, where at least there was also another man, male minister, representatives of county governments, where we had also a male governor of Kericho, the County First Ladies Association, none of the lady First Ladies brought their first gentleman, the civil society, NGOs, and the private sector. The overall Kenyan delegation was led by the Minister for Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs, Professor Margaret Kobia. Over the years, Madam Speaker, the CSW, which is an annual event, attracts men and women from around the world, across the globe. This session, which was the 63rd session, attracted more than 5,200 delegates, with at least 1,850 from government. So we had a lot of civil society and also legislators. The United Nations CSW is the principal global intergovernmental body exclusively dedicated to the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women. The Functional Commission of the Economic and Social Council, called ECOSOC, was established in June of 1946, Madam Speaker. Over the years, the Commission has held a 2-week annual event where representatives of the UN member states, civil society groups, NGOs, and the media converge to discuss priority themes critical to the well-being of women around the globe. So many people ask, and even as I've seen in the coverage from yesterday's dailies about the delegation of 85, at least you've seen we were just 6, of 85 that has gone to Tennessee and Nashville. What was the objective? What is the principal reason why we'd engage in such activities? Madam Speaker, for us, we were very clear about our objectives in this meeting. Number one was to share experiences and to learn best practice in areas relating to the priority theme. And if I had time, Madam Speaker, I would take you through some of those best practice for the record of this House and for our legislative intervention later. I am not sure how much time I have. I am told 20 minutes before we move the motion of adjournment. Strengthening existing and establishing new partnerships, negotiating a common position for Africa on the agreed conclusions, and identifying priority areas for intervention for Kenya to be able to implement. The focus for this year, the theme was social protection. Women and girls. And we had a session before we went. We were really prepared. We had meetings at Serena. We had meetings with the ministry where we agreed on Kenya's position paper. We agreed on which panels will have which representation, Madam Speaker. And I think we had a good showing. And Madam Speaker, you are part of those who did very well at the CSW. This year, there were more than 320 side events hosted by different countries, and there were a number that Kenya as well hosted, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, given those introductory remarks, let me just go quickly, and I will skip large parts of my report, but this report will be available for the public to be able to see and for members to go through. Our position paper as a country elaborated the social protection measures that the Kenyan government has really been part of and has embarked on. And Madam Speaker, many countries really commended us. Given the state of our economy and given, many other aspects, including cultural aspects, what Kenya has been able to do to create opportunities and enhance capacities for the poor and vulnerable in order to sustain their livelihoods. The following are some of the programs that we went to talk about. We talked about social protection response, that is cash transfers, hunger response interventions, school feeding program, the hunger safety nets and fertilizer cost reduction programs. I request when it's 10 minutes, hit the button for me. The health security response, which was managed equipment services. Of course, even as a Senate, when you go out there, you don't go with all your dirty linen. So some of our issues, we live here, but we go there and talk about what we are working on as we come and sort out, and that is the medical, the managed equipment services, Linda Mama, the menstrual health management program, and the Beyond Zero initiative. And the First Lady had a side event which she headlined on Beyond Zero. On the education response, Madam Speaker, the Higher Education Loans Board, the Presidential Secondary Schools Bursary and Private Sector Scholarships. On water and sanitation response, the National Open Defecation Free Kenya 2020 campaign, the community-led total sanitation and the Kenya Integrated Water Sanitation and Hygiene Program were part of that response. And on the social protection and peace response, Madam Speaker, where we even got standing ovations as a country, were on the Uwezo Fund, Women Enterprise Fund, the Wiano Platform for Peace, and the Huduma Centers. And finally, on infrastructure response, the energy and information communication technology, the rural electrification program, which, Madam Speaker, majority of the beneficiaries in this country are women. And from this, it was clear that Kenya has made steady progress in securing income security for vulnerable and poor members of the society. Madam Speaker, I was a panelist during the side event on social protection that was on transforming the social economic landscape for women, girls, and other vulnerable groups. I made a presentation on the role of Kenya's Senate in accelerating social protection for women and girls. I was able to present the legislative oversight and other interventions that members of the Senate, some of whom are in the Senate as I speak, have been able to embark on in accelerating social protection for women and girls. As senators, we all want to see increased allocations to counties with that, because the counties then will have better infrastructural development, which will see women, men, girls, and boys have better access to hospitals, schools, markets, which reduces poverty and opens up more opportunities for women. Madam Speaker, I also spoke to the issue of additional grants to level.
Third Commission on the Status of Women, CSW 63, held in the United Nations.
Point of departure philosophically that we have with the National Assembly. It is the division of revenue process that actually says, in Kenya we've collected 1 trillion or 2 trillion. So this is yours, national government, go budget. And this is yours, county governments, go budget. It is not that, oh, as national government we have budgeted, so we don't have any more money to give the counties. Madam Speaker, unless we put our foot down to make sure that that fundamental shift in thinking that could have existed pre-2010 stops existing, then this baby that we're cradling right now, that actually is walking, taking first steps, going to kindergarten, will live a very, very short life, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the principles of public finance, the principles of devolution are clear. They're spelled out in our constitution. We must protect our counties. And it was very sad, and this one I must say, on the floor of this house, when we had the chairman of the Council of Governors almost throwing the protectors of devolution under the bus by saying that there are two bulls fighting and it's the grass that is hurting. We're not fighting. We're not interested in a fight. We're not interested in ego trips. We're not interested in tough wars. We're protecting the Constitution and protecting devolution. In fact, if anything, he should have kept quiet. Because after that, we have had people even within our platforms as senators, including myself, saying, why don't we then just reduce it if they don't want it? But then we remember, this money that we want to give is not to governors, even if some of them have been dipping their filthy fingers in the cookie jar. It is not governors' money. It is money for our people. It is money for Kenyans. Every part of this country is a county. There is no annex that the national government lives here and the county governments are on the right. We are all part of one country. And so we must change our thinking. We must be able to look at this objectively. I am confident because today I've heard that the National Assembly has negatived the Division of Revenue bill that we've sent. We shall go back into mediation. I am sure that we will have a strong team of mature leaders who will not give in to any antics that will want to bring in sideshows, but will say, in all fairness, this is what we need to give our counties. Madam Speaker, I was in the last mediation. And in that last mediation, all reason was thrown out of the window by our colleagues. Because we said simply that in the division of revenue and on a zero-based budget, and zero-based budgeting is what has this county been using on this expenditure, what do they deserve? And since 219 in the Constitution says that you cannot actually change what you give